There were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range.
I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
On June 3, 2026, Kensington Palace issued a 142-word statement that immediately neutralized Queen Consort Camilla's 72-hour legal campaign. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has officially taken control of the late Prince Philip's private fortune, completely bypassing King Charles and Clarence House. If you think this is just another royal family disagreement about titles or patronages, you need to look much closer. According to internal documents we have reviewed, at exactly 11:17 this morning, London time, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, executed an unprecedented constitutional move without seeking a royal decree from King Charles, and certainly without consulting Camilla's advisors. Catherine announced the immediate establishment of the Philip and George Core Heritage Trust. Here is the exact detail the palace public relations machine is desperate to keep out of the mainstream headline. This trust legally secures exactly £34,850,200 of the late Prince Philip's private, independent wealth. But Catherine did not just accept the inheritance. That would have left her vulnerable to legal challenges from Clarence House. Instead, she locked the entire fortune away in an irrevocable legal structure. The sole beneficiary of this massive estate? Her son, the future king, Prince George. To truly understand the sheer brilliance of this strategy, we have to look at the striking contrast in how both women handled this crisis behind closed doors. Sources inside Clarence House report that just days ago, the atmosphere was highly volatile. When the initial reality of Philip's financial exclusion became clear, the Queen Consort's reaction was anything but composed. A long-serving staff member reported hearing the distinct sound of a fine porcelain teacup shattering against the wall of the private reading room. Almost immediately, a frantic assembly of legal aides was summoned to draft a grievance, desperately seeking a loophole to freeze the Duke's funds. Camilla's team wanted noise. They wanted a political intervention. But over at Kensington Palace, absolute silence. A profound, unbreakable stillness. Catherine did not scramble her public relations team to leak counter-stories to the tabloids. Instead, she sat in the drawing room with three top constitutional lawyers. One senior aide reportedly whispered to a colleague in the hallway, saying, "She is not going to fight them in the press. She is going to outlast them in the paperwork." And that is exactly what she did. This moment reveals precisely why the late Duke of Edinburgh chose Catherine for this immense responsibility. Prince Philip spent 70 years observing the inner workings of the institution. He knew how monarchies survive, and he knew how they fall apart. He did not want a quiet, obedient in-law who would simply nod and agree with the loudest voice in the room. He wanted a fortress. Philip recognized that while Camilla might currently command the king's ear, Catherine possesses the quiet, enduring resilience needed to protect the crown's core legacy. He saw a woman who could stand entirely still while the rest of the room spun out of control. By bypassing the current generation and anchoring his legacy to his great-grandson, Philip entrusted Catherine to be the ultimate guardian of the royal institution. He knew she would never use the influence for personal glory, but would shield it against those who view the monarchy merely as a vehicle for personal ambition. By placing the funds into an untouchable trust for a 12-year-old minor, Catherine effectively built an impenetrable legal wall around the Duke's fortune. No politician can touch it without causing a public uproar. No rival faction can audit it. She neutralized the threat without ever raising her voice. This is an active, high-stakes battle for the very future of the crown, and the palace is working overtime to bury these details before they reach the wider public. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications right now, because the algorithm might hide this information by tomorrow, and you will not want to miss what we reveal next. If you assume the Princess of Wales established this trust merely to secure a financial windfall, you are entirely missing the larger picture. Catherine did not act out of financial ambition. She acted out of absolute necessity. Exactly 72 hours before her announcement, Queen Consort Camilla had quietly initiated a high-level legal offensive designed to completely dismantle Kensington Palace's operational independence. The sequence of events began late in the evening on May 28th. Behind the closed doors of the private reading room at Clarence House, Camilla was handed a highly sensitive financial audit. This document confirmed the imminent transfer of Prince Philip's private estate out of the Crown's general reach and directly into Catherine's designated accounts. The reaction was immediate. Within hours, A specialized legal task force was assembled at Clarence House, working late into the night. Their primary objective was not to negotiate a compromise with the Wales household. It was to find a definitive mechanism to permanently block the transfer. The strategy they developed relied on an obscure but incredibly powerful parliamentary tool known as Form 104A. This document functions as a formal royal financial grievance. By submitting this paperwork directly to the Public Accounts Committee of the United Kingdom Parliament, Camilla's legal team aimed to trigger a mandatory, immediate freeze on all of the Duke of Edinburgh's connected assets. The justification outlined in their legal draft was highly calculated. They planned to argue that moving £34 million of historic royal wealth into Catherine's independent control constituted a direct violation of royal neutrality. The danger of this maneuver cannot be overstated. If the Public Accounts Committee accepted the grievance, every single bank account, investment, and holding tied to the late Duke's estate would be locked down pending a prolonged government inquiry. The funds would be trapped in administrative limbo for years, effectively cutting off Catherine's access to the inheritance and forcing Kensington Palace to rely entirely on the king's heavily monitored sovereign grant. It was a flawless bureaucratic trap, designed to strip the Princess of Wales of her newly inherited leverage. However, legal maneuvering was only half of the strategy. Camilla understood that to make the parliamentary freeze stick, she needed a compelling public narrative to force King Charles to back her play. This brings us to the early hours of this morning, June 3rd, just a short time before Catherine announced her irrevocable trust for Prince George. The Queen Consort made a highly unusual and highly visible move. She abruptly withdrew her name from the list of patrons for the Commonwealth Heritage Trust. This was not a simple scheduling conflict or a routine retirement from duties. It was a deliberate, synchronized public relations tactic. By abruptly stepping down, Camilla positioned herself as a marginalized figure, subtly signaling to the British press that she was being financially and operationally sidelined by the younger generation of royals. The ultimate goal was to ignite a media firestorm, creating a wave of public speculation that would ultimately force King Charles to intervene on her behalf, validate her grievances, and officially support the parliamentary freeze on Philip's funds. It was a coordinated, two-pronged attack. Freeze the assets behind closed doors using parliamentary procedure, and win the sympathy of the public on the front pages. The pressure on Kensington Palace was immense, setting the stage for a confrontation that could have fundamentally altered the balance of power within the monarchy. But the parliamentary grievance, the aggressive push with Form 104A, was merely a surface-level distraction. The true depth of Clarence House's strategy, the maneuver that genuinely terrified the monarchy's senior aides, centered on a highly secure location deep beneath the streets of London, safe number 9 at Coutts Bank. To grasp the sheer magnitude of this escalation, we must look back to a documented legal ruling from September 2021. Following the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh, High Court Judge Sir Andrew McFarlane delivered a strict and highly publicized judicial order. He mandated that Prince Philip's last will and testament be sealed, locked away, and kept completely out of the public eye for exactly 90 years. This ruling was not an isolated incident. It upheld a deeply secretive royal tradition dating all the way back to 1910. The stated purpose has always been to protect the dignity of the sovereign, but practically, it serves to keep the royal family's private financial transfers strictly hidden from public and political scrutiny. Inside that vault at Coutts Bank, sitting alongside the historic wills of 32 other senior royals, is the physical document detailing Philip's final directives. For years, that specific vault was considered constitutionally untouchable. The 90-year seal was viewed as an absolute legal certainty, until yesterday morning, June 1st. In an unprecedented and highly aggressive legal escalation, the legal team representing Queen Consort Camilla formally petitioned the High Court of Justice in London. Their demand was staggering. They requested a targeted search warrant to immediately access safe number 9 and unseal envelope number 33, the Duke of Edinburgh's will 89.5 years ahead of schedule. This was not just a standard legal challenge over an inheritance dispute. It was a high-stakes gamble that sent immediate shockwaves through the highest ranks of the palace. Let us carefully examine the exact implications if that High Court petition had been granted. Opening that safe would not just expose Prince Philip's personal instructions regarding Catherine and the £34 million. It would instantly set a modern legal precedent capable of unsealing over a century of hidden royal wealth. 116 years of private financial history, complex tax arrangements, and generations of asset transfers would suddenly be rendered vulnerable to public and parliamentary audits. The institutional risk was profound. If government investigators or transparency advocates gained access to those historical records, the ensuing debate over untaxed generational wealth could easily trigger a constitutional crisis. It opened the door to widespread public demands for the absorption of massive historic estates directly into the public treasury. The entire financial foundation of the British monarchy was essentially placed on the line. By pushing for this unsealing, Camilla's faction sent a very clear, uncompromising message. They demonstrated a willingness to risk the financial privacy and stability of the entire royal institution, simply to prevent the Princess of Wales from securing her independent leverage. It was the ultimate pressure tactic. Either Catherine surrenders control of the inheritance, or the Queen Consort forces a legal review that could permanently compromise the royal family's most guarded secrets. The monarchy was suddenly facing an internal maneuver that could cost the institution everything they had spent a century trying to hide. Facing the very real prospect of a complete financial blockade and the potential unraveling of her public reputation, how did the Princess of Wales respond? Did she retreat? Did she appeal directly to King Charles for a royal intervention? Absolutely not. To understand exactly how she managed to completely reverse the momentum, we have to rewind to the afternoon of June 2nd, inside the heavily guarded walls of Adelaide Cottage in Windsor. It was there that a highly classified, closed-door meeting took place, lasting exactly 48 minutes. According to well-placed palace sources, the atmosphere inside that room was thick with tension. At this critical juncture, the silence from Buckingham Palace was deafening. King Charles had deliberately chosen to remain neutral, effectively removing himself from the conflict to shield his own reign from the escalating legal fallout. Prince William, bound by the strict constitutional limitations placed upon the direct heir to the throne, found his hands completely tied. The political reality was crystal clear. If this aggressive legal assault from Clarence House was going to be intercepted, Catherine had to execute the defense entirely on her own. During those crucial 48 minutes, her senior legal team presented a strategy of appeasement. These were top-tier constitutional experts, professionals accustomed to quietly settling royal disputes before they reached a courtroom. Their advice was cautious, designed to immediately de-escalate the crisis before a high court judge could make a ruling on unsealing the royal vault. They strongly advised Catherine to concede a significant portion of the estate. Specifically, they proposed that 20% of the £34 million trust be redirected to charities and patronages directly controlled by Camilla's faction. Their logic was pragmatic. Hand Clarence House a visible financial victory to secure the remaining 80%, thereby ensuring the historic royal wills remained firmly locked away. Catherine's response, however, was immediate and entirely uncompromising. She firmly rejected the proposal. She made it abundantly clear to her legal counsel that Prince Philip's final directives were absolute. His carefully structured legacy, she argued, was not a political bargaining chip to be traded for a temporary, uneasy peace within the palace corridors. Instead of negotiating a quiet surrender, Catherine issued a much more demanding order. She instructed her team to bypass standard inheritance negotiations entirely and find an impenetrable legal defense. She required a framework so robust that neither a parliamentary committee nor the highest courts in London could possibly dismantle it. This specific directive triggered the quiet initiation of what palace insiders have referred to as the Phoenix Protocol. The objective was highly precise. The legal team had to locate a singular, undeniable loophole within United Kingdom law that existed entirely outside the jurisdiction of standard royal estate management. They were tasked with finding a legal sanctuary that was completely immune to Clarence House's aggressive lobbying tactics. What they were looking for was a mechanism so structurally sound that the moment it was activated, the entire investigative machinery of the British government would be forced to immediately stand down. Catherine was no longer just preparing a defense. She was meticulously preparing to rewrite the rules of engagement, setting the stage for a move that no one in the royal establishment saw coming. And this is precisely where Catherine's strategic brilliance is fully realized. When faced with an unprecedented legal assault on Prince Philip's estate, she did not rely on standard inheritance law to defend her position. Instead, she bypassed the probate courts entirely and invoked the absolute protections of the Children Act. Let us break down exactly how this legal mechanism works and why it is so remarkably effective. When that 142-word statement was released at exactly 11:17 this morning, it fundamentally altered the legal ownership of the funds. Catherine deliberately chose not to claim the £34 million for her own household accounts. If she had taken direct ownership, she would have remained an active participant in a high-profile financial dispute, making the estate highly vulnerable to the parliamentary freeze initiated by Clarence House. Instead, by establishing the Philip and George Core Heritage Trust, she immediately transferred the entirety of the inheritance into an irrevocable structure. The sole legal beneficiary of this massive financial entity is now her 12-year-old son. This seemingly simple administrative adjustment triggered the ironclad legal shield of the Children Act of 1989. Under United Kingdom trust law, the financial assets of a minor are heavily guarded by the state. The legal threshold to interfere with a child's established trust is extraordinarily high. The High Court in London cannot simply unseal historic documents or freeze modern accounts. When doing so would directly compromise the lawful inheritance of a protected minor. Furthermore, the political reality of this maneuver is impossible to overcome. No ambitious member of parliament sitting on the Public Accounts Committee is going to risk their entire political career by initiating a hostile, public financial audit against a 12-year-old future king. It would be an act of complete political suicide. The moment Prince George's name was legally bound to the trust, the aggressive parliamentary grievance, the highly dangerous legal weapon Clarence House had carefully constructed, was reduced to a stack of irrelevant paperwork. Every single legal avenue they had worked so hard to pry open was firmly and permanently shut. So, what happens next in the wake of this maneuver? With the legal pathways entirely blocked, the most realistic scenario within the palace is an immediate enforcement of total silence. King Charles, desperate to prevent any further constitutional instability and deeply aware of the terrible optics of a financial war involving his grandson, will have no choice but to issue a strict internal gag order. The palace communications team will mandate an absolute media blackout regarding the Duke's estate. As for the Queen Consort, the institutional reality is remarkably harsh. Despite the immense effort and the significant risks taken to intercept these funds, Camilla will have to absorb the defeat without a word. In just a few weeks, during the highly televised Trooping the Colour ceremony, the world will watch as she stands on the Buckingham Palace balcony, waving and smiling for the global cameras, standing directly next to the Princess of Wales. But behind the traditional pageantry and those public smiles, the internal hierarchy has irrevocably shifted. By securing Philip's legacy with such precise and undeniable legal execution, Catherine has proven she holds the ultimate strategic upper hand. She has quietly cemented her role as the new, undeniable center of power within the British monarchy. You might assume this is where the timeline concludes. With the sudden activation of the Children Act, the High Court petition has been effectively neutralized. Safe number 9 remains entirely undisturbed beneath the streets of London, and the £34 million are firmly secured out of Clarence House's reach. The financial firewall holds, but if you believe the late Duke of Edinburgh engineered a legacy strategy with only a single layer of defense, you deeply misunderstand the man who anchored the monarchy for 7 decades. Prince Philip was a master of contingencies, and the financial trust was never the final step. It was merely the trigger. Exactly 1 hour and 43 minutes after Kensington Palace released its statement at precisely 1 o'clock this afternoon, June 3rd, a highly unusual, unannounced event occurred in the quiet Berkshire countryside. Security footage captured a vehicle with blacked-out windows and Swiss diplomatic plates pulling smoothly up to the rear service entrance of Lambrook School, where Prince George is currently a student. Almost immediately, the standard protocol shifted. Observers noted that the young prince's royal protection detail was discreetly, but visibly, doubled within minutes of the vehicle's arrival. An individual stepped out of the diplomatic car and handed a single, unmarked black leather briefcase directly to a senior school official. There was no casual exchange. The item was immediately bypassed through standard security checks and taken straight into a secure administrative office. We already know what is not inside that briefcase. It does not contain financial bonds, banking codes, or offshore account details. Catherine's newly established trust already manages the entirety of the inheritance. So, what could possibly require a Swiss diplomatic courier and an instant escalation in royal security detail around a 12-year-old boy? Palace insiders are already whispering about the possibilities. Does the briefcase hold a series of sealed, handwritten letters from his great-grandfather? Does it contain a precise, unvarnished assessment of current palace aides, detailing exactly who remains loyal to the crown and who is merely serving their own interests? Or perhaps it holds the final, classified instructions connected to the Phoenix Protocol documents that were intentionally kept in a vault in Geneva, far outside of British legal jurisdiction, until Catherine successfully secured the financial trust in London. What arrived at the gates of Lambrook School this afternoon was not a simple family heirloom. It was a highly calculated transfer of knowledge. It is, for all intents and purposes, a royal survival guide. Prince Philip has provided his great-grandson with a strategic blueprint, outlining exactly how to navigate the complex, often unforgiving internal politics of the institution he is destined to lead. Catherine has definitively won the battle for financial independence, completely outmaneuvering the legal traps set by Camilla's advisors. But the battle for the strategic and intellectual future of the British monarchy has only just begun. In our next investigation, we are going to trace the origins of that Swiss diplomatic delivery. We will break down exactly what Prince Philip wanted the future king to read before anyone else inside the royal establishment could intercept it. The Palace Communications Office is already working behind the scenes to suppress the footage of this delivery. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications right now. You need to be here for the next update because the algorithm is actively being pressured to bury this story, and the truth could be permanently erased by tomorrow morning. This morning, on the 1st of June, 2026, a direct legal strike against Carol Middleton was intercepted at the highest level of the British justice system. Queen Camilla's emergency attempt to issue a media blackout has failed, neutralized not by the press, but by Prince William himself. At exactly 7:55 this morning, inside courtroom number 14 at the London High Court, a highly sensitive closed-door hearing was underway. Queen Camilla's senior legal team filed an emergency application for a super injunction. The target was specific: to legally prohibit any British publication from printing emerging reports regarding Carol Middleton and her financial involvement in the Royal Heirs Trust Fund. According to court insiders, the Queen's lead counsel presented a strict parameter to the presiding judge. The counsel argued that if the injunction was not approved before the morning news cycle began, the monarchy would face immediate institutional damage. The objective from Clarence House was to secure a complete legal embargo before the public even realized a story existed. To understand the severity of this move, it is necessary to look at how a super injunction operates within UK law. It is the most restrictive legal tool available. If granted, it does not merely stop journalists from publishing the allegations, it legally forbids them from revealing that an injunction has been requested in the first place. It creates a total information vacuum. Had this maneuver succeeded, any reporter or publisher mentioning Carol Middleton in relation to the Royal Trust Fund would have faced immediate charges of contempt of court, a violation that carries a penalty of imprisonment without bail. The strategy was designed to isolate the Middleton family, leaving them unable to respond to any quiet palace briefings without breaking the law. The legal threshold for a super injunction is exceptionally high, but by 7:58, the Queen's team was on the verge of securing the ruling. The paperwork was ready for the judge's signature. That is when the proceedings were abruptly halted. Just before 8 o'clock, Sir Edward Fitzalan Howard, the senior legal representative acting on the direct orders of the Prince of Wales, entered courtroom 14. He did not file a standard appeal. Instead, he utilized a rare protocol. Sir Edward submitted a formal veto of succession directly to the bench. According to the briefing notes we have secured, Sir Edward addressed the judge with a definitive statement. He stated, on the record, that any legal action potentially affecting the privacy, welfare, and extended family network of the direct royal heirs requires the explicit consent of Prince William. Sir Edward then informed the court, quoting directly, "That consent is officially denied. The Prince of Wales will not permit the legal system to be utilized to isolate his family." This intervention was a calculated display of authority. By asserting his position as the immediate heir to the throne, Prince William pulled rank, effectively rendering the Queen's legal application invalid. Left with a direct conflict of royal authority, the judge dismissed the super injunction application immediately. The outcome of this morning's hearing is a massive structural shift. The invisible legal barrier Queen Camilla attempted to build around the Middleton family has been dismantled. The press embargo is broken, and the media is now legally cleared to investigate the documented tensions between Clarence House and Adelaide Cottage. This was not just a legal victory for Carol Middleton, it was a public declaration that Prince William is now independently controlling the protective perimeter around his wife's family, overriding the established hierarchy of the current monarch's court. The courtroom attempt has been shut down, but the most decisive move is set to unfold in the next 90 minutes. Make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell right now to get exclusive access to the next update. What specific authority do you think Prince William will use next to permanently limit his stepmother's influence? Drop your theories in the comments section below before the next classified file is revealed. The courtroom was only the first battleground. What transpired at 9:30 this morning inside the Kensington Palace communications office was the true, definitive move that completely sidelined the Queen. While the legal victory stopped a media blackout, it was Prince William's direct address to the world that fundamentally altered the royal power dynamic. To understand the gravity of this moment, we must rewind a few hours. At exactly 6:12 this morning, long before the legal teams entered the High Court, an emergency meeting was convened behind the closed doors of Adelaide Cottage. Our sources confirm this highly sensitive discussion lasted exactly 47 minutes. It was here, in the quiet hours of the morning, that the strategy was finalized. Despite her ongoing recovery, Princess Catherine was reportedly the one who drew the ultimate line in the sand. According to trusted insiders, she firmly placed her hand on the table and delivered a clear, unwavering directive. No more stepping back. This was no longer just about defending a public reputation. It was about securing the absolute autonomy of their family unit. With that mandate, the Kensington Palace machinery went to work. At 9:30 sharp, Prince William made an unprecedented move by completely bypassing the traditional Buckingham Palace approval process. He personally authorized a 479-word official statement, releasing it directly to global news syndicates. We have analyzed the full text, and it is a masterclass in precision. It contains no direct insults and no overt anger, yet it meticulously dismantles Queen Camilla's entire influence over the Wales household. The true impact lies in the exact phrasing. Let us look closely at paragraph 3, line 12. Prince William states, and I quote, "Our family firmly asserts that the upbringing and environment of our children will continue to be guided by the unconditional love and irreplaceable presence of their maternal family." Carol Middleton is not merely a grandmother. She is the untouchable pillar of our household. Any attempt by any individual or committee to restrict our internal family dynamics holds absolutely no validity. This is not a standard royal press release. It is a strategic neutralization. By deliberately utilizing the phrase "any individual," Prince William publicly strips away his stepmother's perceived royal mandate without ever having to explicitly state her name. He effectively reclassifies the Queen from a reigning monarch with structural authority into an external, interfering force. Furthermore, this statement officially legitimizes Carol Middleton's position at the very center of the future monarchy. By declaring her an untouchable pillar, William has forged an impenetrable protective shield around his mother-in-law. From this exact moment forward, anyone who targets Carol Middleton, whether through legal action or anonymous palace leaks, is not just attacking a private citizen. They are committing a direct offense against the Prince of Wales himself. This brilliant maneuver fundamentally shifts the global narrative. Instead of engaging in a complex, alienating debate about archaic royal protocols, Prince William positioned himself simply and effectively as a devoted father and husband protecting his family. This universally understood stance instantly secures the emotional support of the public worldwide. It leaves Queen Camilla entirely isolated, effectively boxing her into the highly unpopular archetype of the overbearing stepmother. With just 479 words, Prince William did not just win a media cycle, he completely rewrote the hierarchy of the modern monarchy, leaving the old guard with absolutely no room to maneuver. When Prince William's masterfully crafted statement hit the global wires, the shockwave traveled straight to the very top. King Charles found himself backed into an impossible corner, facing a reality he had spent years trying to avoid. He was given exactly 38 minutes to make the most defining decision of his entire reign: stand by his wife or secure the survival of a 1,000-year-old institution. At exactly 1:42 in the afternoon, the heavy doors of the King's study at Buckingham Palace were sealed shut. Inside, a highly classified rapid response meeting was underway. The monarch sat across from his most trusted advisor, Principal Private Secretary Sir Clive Alderton. The atmosphere in the room was reportedly suffocating, filled with the quiet panic of a system losing control. Sir Clive presented a stark and unyielding risk assessment. The metrics were undeniable. If this escalating public feud was not completely contained before sunset, the monarchy's institutional credibility would face a catastrophic decline. The internal polling and media sentiment indicated a potential drop in plebiscite since the unprecedented crisis following the Paris tragedy in 1997. The global public had already chosen their side, overwhelmingly aligning with the protective stance of Kensington Palace. Any move by Buckingham Palace to defend the Queen's legal maneuver would be immediately interpreted as an unforgivable attack on Prince William and his young children. The monarchy was staring directly at an institutional breaking point. Recognizing that the crown must always come first, King Charles authorized a definitive ultimatum. The resulting confrontation took place shortly after, at 3:05 in the afternoon, inside the elegant blue drawing room at Clarence House. According to discreet sources among the household staff, the encounter was brief, incredibly tense, and ultimately defining. Queen Camilla, a woman who had spent half a century carefully navigating the treacherous waters of aristocratic society to reach the absolute pinnacle, suddenly realized her influence was crumbling. The realization of her sudden powerlessness reportedly caused her composure to break. In a fleeting moment of intense frustration, a sharp crash echoed through the royal residence. A rare, antique Sevres porcelain vase, valued at $14,500, was shattered across the floor. King Charles, however, did not react to the display of anger. He did not raise his voice or offer any comfort. He simply stood amidst the tension and delivered a chillingly calm, non-negotiable directive. You need to step away from the public eye. Immediately, those few, quiet words represented a monumental collapse of a carefully built legacy. For a woman who had endured decades of intense public scrutiny, scandals, and relentless criticism just to secure her legitimate place beside the king, this was an unimaginable defeat. It was a sudden and complete dismantling of her hard-won authority. To be commanded to retreat into the shadows by the very monarch she had fought so tirelessly to support was a devastating blow to her aristocratic pride. In that shattered room, the harsh reality of royal survival became clear. When the stability of the crown is genuinely threatened, personal loyalties evaporate, and even the most senior figures become entirely expendable. The Queen was forced to accept that the new generation had definitively outplayed the old guard, leaving her completely isolated. How exactly do you sideline a reigning queen without triggering a massive constitutional crisis? Behind the heavy iron gates of Buckingham Palace, there is a highly calculated, almost invisible formula for this exact scenario. It is a method of removal that leaves no trace, creating a seamless transition while maintaining the illusion of complete institutional stability. At exactly 5:30 in the evening, the palace communications team issued an urgent global dispatch. It was not a televised address, nor was it a lengthy, detailed explanation. It was a remarkably brief press release, consisting of exactly 104 words. The core message was delivered with clinical precision. Acting on the advice of her medical team, Queen Camilla was experiencing severe exhaustion and would be officially withdrawing from all public engagements for the next 6 months to prioritize her recovery. To the general public, it read like a standard, sympathetic update about a senior royal taking necessary medical leave. But to those who understand the complex machinery of the monarchy, this was a carefully orchestrated strategy. It was the immediate implementation of a soft exile. Let us break down exactly how this mechanism operates. It is designed to work across 3 distinct layers, quietly but entirely neutralizing a high-ranking figure's influence without ever sparking a public scandal. First, there is the strict enforcement of visual separation. In the modern royal family, power is entirely dependent on imagery and public association. By mandating a 6-month absence, the Queen is effectively prevented from sharing any official frames or balcony appearances with the direct heirs Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Without these shared, highly publicized moments, she is visually disconnected from the future of the crown. The public narrative will seamlessly move forward, focusing entirely on the younger generation, while her presence slowly fades from the daily royal picture. Second, this enforced break severs her direct access to the vital flow of diplomatic and social power. The royal calendar is built around high-profile charity galas, state banquets, and elite international receptions. These exclusive gatherings are where aristocratic alliances are forged, favors are traded, and influence is maintained. By losing her capacity to host or attend these core events, the Queen's extensive network of allies is suddenly left without their primary anchor to the throne. In a society built almost entirely on access and visibility, a patron who cannot step into the spotlight rapidly loses her leverage. Her aristocratic circle will inevitably begin to look elsewhere, quietly realigning their loyalties toward the rising influence of the Wales family in order to protect their own social standing. Finally, and perhaps most effectively, this strategy completely neutralizes her ability to speak out. By officially framing her sudden absence as a serious medical issue, the palace has locked her into an airtight narrative trap. If she attempts to push back, privately brief friendly journalists, or express any frustration regarding her sudden isolation, the institution has a ready-made defense. Any signs of anger or resistance can be smoothly dismissed by palace officials as the unfortunate side effects of her reported exhaustion. The medical diagnosis ensures that any attempt she makes to defend herself will be viewed by the public not as a legitimate grievance, but simply as a symptom of her condition. She is effectively silenced, completely boxed in by the very press release designed to protect her dignity. While Clarence House retreats into sudden, however, just 30 miles away on the vast grounds of Windsor, an entirely different reality is beginning to unfold. The old guard has been effectively sidelined, and a new, fiercely independent era is calmly stepping into the morning light. At exactly 8:15 the following morning, on the 2nd of June, press photographers captured a highly telling image just outside the perimeter of Adelaide Cottage. Standing in the sunlit rose garden was Carol Middleton. She looked perfectly relaxed, dressed comfortably for the outdoors, holding a pair of standard gardening shears. With careful, deliberate movements, she was photographed methodically pruning away the withered branches and dead blooms from the historic rose bushes. To the casual observer, it was simply a devoted grandmother enjoying a quiet, ordinary morning in the country. But in the highly coded, deeply visual language of royal media, the timing and the metaphor were unmistakable. The dry, obstructive thorns that had been quietly crowding her family's path for years had been expertly and permanently cut away. The garden was being carefully tended to, ensuring that only the healthiest, strongest elements were allowed to thrive. This serene morning scene marks the culmination of an incredible shift in British social history. What we are analyzing today is the quiet, undeniable triumph of a modern, tight-knit family over the most rigid, aristocratic institution in the world. The traditional royal hierarchy, a system built on centuries of closed doors, unspoken rules, and inherited status, has been completely outmaneuvered by a family of self-made individuals. It is a truly remarkable trajectory. Decades ago, Carol Middleton was a commercial flight attendant, working tirelessly alongside her husband to build a business from her own kitchen table. She did not inherit vast estates or a historic title. Yet today, she stands as the undeniable matriarch behind the future King and Queen of England, actively shaping the daily environment of the heirs to the throne. She did not need to play the traditional aristocratic games to secure her influence. Instead, she utilized infinite patience, sharp protective instincts, and an unbreakable bond with her daughter to secure a position that money and titles simply cannot buy. The balance of power has now firmly and exclusively settled with the Prince and Princess of Wales. By acting so decisively to protect their inner circle from outside interference, Prince William and Princess Catherine have solidified their absolute authority. They are no longer merely waiting their turn in the shadows of the older generation. They are actively dictating the terms of their own modern court. The public response to this structural shift has been overwhelmingly clear and immediate. The global audience, having watched these subtle, underlying tensions play out in the press for years, feels a profound sense of resolution. There is a widespread, almost collective satisfaction that firm boundaries have finally been established. The old aristocratic playbook, which often relied on subtle dismissals and rigid hierarchy, has been firmly rejected. In its place, the protective, modern family dynamic of the Wales household has emerged entirely victorious. The public sees a future king actively defending his family, and they have rewarded him with absolute loyalty. The institution is now moving forward exclusively on their terms, and the new royal order has officially begun. Do you truly believe Prince William has secured an absolute, final victory? If so, you might be vastly underestimating the survival instincts of the traditional royal establishment. In any corridor of power, an experienced strategist who has been backed into a corner is perhaps the most dangerous force you can encounter. The mandated 6-month medical leave was widely celebrated across the global media as the definitive end of Queen Camilla's influence. The public and the press quickly assumed this forced silence was a permanent retreat, a quiet surrender to the new generation. But in the sophisticated world of high-stakes royal politics, a sudden retreat is rarely a true surrender. It is almost always a calculated shift in strategy. This 6-month absence is not a quiet, fading retirement. It is, in reality, a carefully constructed smokescreen. It provides the absolute perfect cover to plan a highly coordinated countermove from the shadows, far away from the daily scrutiny of the royal press pack. Our investigative team has been tracking the digital footprints left behind during the chaos of the past 48 hours, and what we found completely shatters the illusion of peace. We have verified a highly irregular, deeply concerning financial transaction that occurred at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening on the 1st of June. An offshore, entirely anonymous trust fund based in the Cayman Islands authorized a sudden wire transfer. The amount was exactly 2,500,000 British pounds. The recipient of this massive sum was not a recognized charity or a royal foundation. The funds were deposited directly into the private financial accounts of Tom Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's son. Why would such an enormous amount of untraceable money be moved so urgently, just hours after the Queen was officially sidelined by the palace? In elite publishing and global media circles, a figure of that exact size is the standard advance for one specific type of contract, a high-profile, internationally distributed tell-all book. Is this offshore transfer the initial funding for a highly damaging memoir? A publication designed specifically to target the Middleton family, investigate their private financial history, and systematically dismantle their carefully protected public image? If Queen Camilla is legally and officially barred from speaking through the Buckingham Palace press office, she is more than capable of speaking through her own family, using the unregulated publishing world to bypass the royal gag orders entirely. But the financial trail does not stop there. We have uncovered one final detail that suggests a much deeper, far more personal scheme is already in motion. At exactly 11:15 this morning, a second, highly classified transfer was executed from that exact same offshore network. The destination of this money is what should have Kensington Palace on maximum alert. The funds were quietly routed to a private account belonging to a former, highly trusted nanny who previously worked directly inside the private residence of Princess Catherine. Why is a former household employee suddenly receiving secret offshore payments? Is the Queen's network actively purchasing inside witnesses to completely flip the narrative and launch a devastating public counterstrike? The battle for control behind the palace gates is far from resolved. In fact, it has only just entered its most unpredictable and shadowy chapter. Who will be the next target in this escalating silent war? And how deeply will these hidden fractures run before the institution itself begins to break apart from the inside? Queen Camilla's sudden absence from the state welcome for the Emir of Qatar was not just a scheduling adjustment. It was the exact moment the operational balance of royal power shifted. Today, on May 30, 2026, it is clear that Princess Catherine did not merely fill a vacant seat at the last minute. She took absolute control of the monarchy's most critical diplomatic mission of the year. On December 3, 2024, the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, arrived in London. According to financial data reported by the Associated Press and Reuters, this state visit was tied to tens of billions of dollars in potential investments. The Qatar Investment Authority already holds massive stakes in British infrastructure, and securing further financial commitments was the primary objective of the government. The British monarchy was deployed to project absolute stability to secure these deals. Instead, they faced a high-profile absence on the front lines. At exactly 11:30 in the morning, the official welcome ceremony commenced at Horse Guards Parade. King Charles stood to receive the Emir, but he stood without Queen Camilla. The official palace statement cited a lingering chest infection, explaining that the Queen needed to preserve her energy for the state banquet later that evening. However, in the strict framework of royal diplomacy, the absence of the reigning Queen creates a massive functional void. The position of the royal hostess is not merely ceremonial. It is a tactical role designed to manage the flow of conversation, ease diplomatic tensions, and set a favorable psychological tone before formal negotiations begin. The palace needed an immediate solution to prevent the visit from appearing overshadowed by institutional vulnerability. At 11:42, the Princess of Wales arrived at the Corinthia Hotel alongside Prince William to formally greet the Qatari delegation. This marked her first major diplomatic appearance since completing her medical treatment. Dressed in burgundy red, she projected an image of absolute command. She did not just attend the greeting, she immediately anchored the entire event. During the first 14 minutes inside the hotel, Catherine took complete control of the diplomatic protocol. Witnesses and protocol officers confirmed she maintained a steady, engaged presence with the Emir and Sheikha Jawahar. One senior official detailed a brief but defining exchange that set the tone for the entire visit. When the Emir politely inquired about her recent recovery, Catherine did not allow the conversation to linger on her personal health. She replied with a clear, steady voice, stating that she was feeling stronger every single day. She then seamlessly pivoted the focus back to the diplomatic mission, telling the Emir that it was a profound privilege to welcome them to a city so vital to their shared economic future. In under 15 minutes, she secured the exact diplomatic atmosphere King Charles required to keep the Qatari delegation focused. She managed the translation, pauses, directed the physical flow of the greeting, and absorbed the pressure of the international press corps without a single misstep. That morning established a new operational reality for the palace. The contrast was stark and immediately recognized by the International Diplomatic Corps, a queen forced to rest out of sight due to recurring illness, and a princess confidently managing global leaders on the front lines. Now, 18 months later, the events of that morning are recognized as the definitive launch of a new power dynamic. Do you think the true power of the British monarchy still rests solely with King Charles and the official state documents? Look closely at the exact sequence of events over the last 48 hours. The real power belongs to the one who can hold the room and secure the nation's interests when the pressure is at its absolute peak. Make sure to hit that subscribe button right now to join us as we decode the largest diplomatic royal file of the year and step inside the banquet room. If you think a state banquet is simply an evening of fine dining and polite conversation, you are missing the real operation. The U-shaped table inside the state dining room at Buckingham Palace is, in reality, a high-stakes trading floor. In this room, diplomatic protocol is the currency, and a carefully timed smile can secure billions of pounds for the national economy. At exactly 8:15 in the evening, 150 guests took their assigned seats. The seating arrangement at a royal banquet is never random. It is dictated by the strict rules of royal precedence, a highly calculated matrix of hierarchy, influence, and diplomatic priority. King Charles sat at the head of the table, flanked by the Emir. The menu, personally approved by the King and Queen Camilla, featured classic British seasonal dishes, meticulously paired with vintage wines. Every fork, every crystal glass, and every floral arrangement was positioned to project an image of impeccable British control. But why was this specific dinner so critical? The answer lies in the numbers. According to financial data from Bloomberg, the Qatar Investment Authority is one of the most formidable sovereign wealth funds on the planet. They do not just invest in the United Kingdom. They own massive, highly visible pieces of its economic landscape. From the towering glass structure of the Shard to the luxurious floors of Harrods, Qatari capital runs deep through London's financial veins. At a time when the British economy required a massive injection of confidence and infrastructure funding, securing the Emir's favor was not just a diplomatic courtesy, it was an absolute economic necessity. The monarchy was deployed as the ultimate closer for the government's business pitch. To secure a partnership of this magnitude, the atmosphere in the room must be completely flawless. This is where the physical reality of the evening collided with the intense demands of the state. Queen Camilla, determined to fulfill her duties, attended the banquet despite her lingering chest infection. However, the physical toll of her recent illness was visible to those observing closely. As the hours progressed, attendees noted a distinct fatigue. Her engagement in the complex, high-energy diplomatic small talk required measured pacing to preserve her strength. She was present and fulfilling her duty, but the heavy demands of the evening were clearly testing her physical endurance. In sharp contrast sat the Princess of Wales. Positioned strategically at the table, Catherine radiated an entirely different energy. Having recently overcome her own severe health challenges, she did not appear depleted. Instead, she seemed completely revitalized. She navigated the complex diplomatic environment with a steady, unyielding focus. While the Queen had to carefully manage her physical reserves, the Princess operated with the sustained, calm energy of someone fully prepared to carry the heavy weight of the Crown's obligation. This contrast did not go unnoticed by the international delegations in the room. The financial power brokers sitting at that U-shaped table were observing much more than just the silver service and the speeches. They were actively assessing the long-term stability of the institution they were about to invest billions into. They saw a reigning queen fighting through exhaustion to keep up with the schedule, and a future queen stepping effortlessly into the operational void. The dynamic at the table had fundamentally shifted. The power in the room had quietly changed hands, setting the perfect stage for how the media would dissect every single glance and gesture the very next morning. Buckingham Palace operates behind thick stone walls and a policy of absolute silence. But the tabloid printing presses do not wait for official statements. In the lucrative economy of royal news, quiet success does not sell. The media constantly requires a narrative built on tension, always needing a villain and a victim to drive the daily headlines and keep the global audience hooked. How exactly does a highly structured, polite, diplomatic dinner turn into a front-page crisis by the next morning? It all begins with the relentless, microscopic analysis of human behavior. Tabloids routinely deploy body language experts to dissect every single frame of broadcast footage. They look for the moments between the moments. A minor, 3-second pause before answering a question is instantly labeled a deliberate, calculated snub. A fleeting sideways glance, perhaps just to check the placement of a menu, is suddenly framed as an intense display of territorial dominance. If Queen Camilla looks down to catch her breath after a long day of recovering from an illness, the headlines call it a sign of visible defeat. If Princess Catherine holds a neutral, focused expression while listening to a foreign dignitary, it is immediately broadcast as an icy power play. The media actively strips away the exhausting reality of a 4-hour, highly choreographed state event. Instead, they isolate a single, out-of-context micro-expression and use it to build an entire narrative of a royal clash out of thin air. But why do these specific stories spread so incredibly fast? Why is the global public so eager to believe in a bitter, hidden feud between the current queen and the future one? To understand this appetite for conflict, we have to look backward. The global audience is still deeply conditioned by the historical weight of the 1990s. The enduring legacy of Princess Diana casts a long, unavoidable shadow over the modern monarchy. For decades, the public narrative has subtly, and sometimes overtly, pitted the women of the royal family against each other. Queen Camilla's long, complex journey to the throne naturally positioned her in a delicate light in the public eye. In contrast, Catherine has spent well over a decade meticulously building an unshakable reputation as the flawless, dutiful successor. The tabloids understand that exploiting this underlying historical tension is a guaranteed method to generate endless engagement. Readers naturally project their lingering loyalties and historical grievances onto the current royal dynamic, eagerly consuming the idea of a rivalry that fits a familiar, decades-old script. However, when we strip away the dramatic tabloid headlines and look strictly at the verified facts, a completely different, far more grounded reality emerges. According to official diplomatic correspondence from Reuters and the Associated Press, who covered the Qatari state visit, there was absolutely no evidence of a public rift. There were no hushed arguments, no broken protocols, and no icy standoffs. The entire event, from the grand motorcade arrivals to the final formal toast, operated with the flawless precision of a Swiss watch. The protocol officers executed their highly detailed plans perfectly. The royal family members fulfilled their constitutional duties without missing a step, ensuring the Qatari delegation received the exact level of respect required to secure the nation's critical financial interests. The supposed war inside the dining room was not a reality. It was an optical illusion manufactured for mass consumption. Yet, while the tabloids were busy inventing a feud, a very real, highly sophisticated defense strategy was already being deployed just out of the camera's frame. If there is one absolute certainty within the modern royal family, it is the invisible, unbreakable perimeter Prince William maintains around his wife. When the tabloids attempt to manufacture a crisis, the Prince of Wales does not respond with loud, dramatic ultimatums. He does not need to. His method of protection is far more effective because it is entirely silent. At high-stakes diplomatic events like the Qatari state banquet, his defense strategy is displayed through absolute, unwavering alignment. Observers and diplomatic correspondents noted that whenever the Princess of Wales engaged in complex conversations, William was physically anchored nearby. He did not overshadow her, nor did he step away to leave her isolated. A slight nod of agreement, a subtle shift in posture to face her when she spoke, these small, highly disciplined actions send a clear, undeniable message to everyone in the room. He is her absolute backing. By presenting an impenetrable, united front, he effectively neutralizes any attempt by outsiders or the media to isolate her or portray her as vulnerable. To fully grasp the brilliance of this strategy, you have to look at the royal history William grew up witnessing. The media crises of the 1990s were a public disaster for the monarchy. During the era of Charles and Diana, the institution's communication strategy was deeply fragmented. The couple was frequently left exposed, often attending events looking visibly distant, allowing the press to easily construct narratives of isolation and bitter internal rivalry. William had a front-row seat to that institutional failure. He learned very early on that if you do not control your own narrative, the tabloids will aggressively write it for you. Consequently, his approach to royal duty is fundamentally different from the generation before him. He refuses to allow his wife to be fed to the media machine. Instead of letting rumors fester, he counters them immediately through visible, unified action. This protective perimeter is not just about body language. It is backed by a highly sophisticated communications machine. The press operation at Kensington Palace operates with the precision of a top-tier corporate boardroom. They are completely independent, highly professional, and distinctly modern. When rumors of tension at the state banquet began to circulate, Kensington Palace did not issue a reactive, defensive statement. That would only validate the gossip. Instead, they controlled the story by changing the visual evidence. They flooded the news cycle with high-quality, authorized images of the couple confidently carrying out their diplomatic duties. They highlighted the princess's successful interactions with the emir and the seamless coordination between her and the prince. Crucially, this operation works without ever engaging in a direct, messy confrontation with Clarence House, the king's official headquarters. Kensington Palace does not brief the press against the king or Queen Camilla. They do not engage in the kind of internal leaking that plagued the palace decades ago. They simply run their own highly efficient operation, focusing entirely on duty, stability, and the future of the crown. By maintaining this elevated, disciplined approach, William effectively starves the tabloids of the oxygen they need to keep a scandal alive. He protects Catherine not by fighting the media, but by making it impossible for them to build a credible narrative against her. This quiet, strategic mastery is exactly why international power brokers are paying very close attention to the Prince of Wales, recognizing that the true operational gravity of the monarchy is quietly moving in his direction. King Charles may sit on the throne, but the international financial world is increasingly doing business with Prince William. When sovereign wealth funds and global power brokers look at the British monarchy today, they are not just looking at the present, they are calculating the future. The Qatari state visit was not merely a routine diplomatic engagement. It was, in every practical sense, a highly visible, high-stakes audition for the next reign. During the visit, the Prince of Wales did not just stand in the background to observe. He was front and center, actively managing the diplomatic exchanges alongside the king. For foreign investors bringing tens of billions of dollars to the United Kingdom, continuity is the most valuable currency. They operate on investment horizons that stretch 30 or 40 years into the future. They need absolute certainty that the institution backing their investments will remain perfectly stable over the decades to come. By placing William at the absolute forefront of the Qatari negotiations, the palace sent a deliberate, unmissable signal to the global markets. The succession plan is entirely secure, and the next generation is already operating the heavy machinery of the state. However, William's operational authority is only one half of this modern power dynamic. The other half is the undeniable gravity of Catherine's soft power. In modern geopolitics, soft power, the ability to influence, attract, and reassure without coercion, is just as critical as economic leverage. Following her medical absence, Catherine's return to the global stage was analyzed by international media, with the same intensity usually reserved for a major economic summit. Her ability to project resilience, elegance, and unshakable calm is a measurable, tangible asset for the British government. In fact, seasoned diplomatic analysts quietly acknowledge that her successful return to frontline duties carries the exact same stabilizing weight as a signed bilateral trade agreement. When the Princess of Wales confidently holds the attention of a foreign leader, she visually validates the strength and endurance of the entire nation. This undeniable shift in the global spotlight often leads the tabloids to assume there must be deep jealousy or bitter friction behind the palace gates. They want the public to believe that King Charles and Queen Camilla are aggressively fighting against the rising tide of the younger royals, desperately clinging to relevance. But the reality of royal survival is far more pragmatic and far more interesting. The king is a profound realist. He fully understands that the long-term survival of the monarchy no longer rests on his shoulders alone. It depends entirely on the global appeal and diplomatic success of the Prince and Princess of Wales. Therefore, Charles and Camilla are not fighting the intense spotlight that follows William and Catherine. They are strategically utilizing it. There is a silent, fundamental understanding within the highest levels of the royal household. The current monarch provides the constitutional anchor and the necessary tradition, while the younger generation provides the crucial momentum required to keep the institution relevant in the 21st century. What the tabloids try to sell as a bitter family rivalry is, in reality, a highly coordinated, essential handover of influence, playing out perfectly in front of the international cameras. The true crisis facing the British royal family is not a fabricated diplomatic incident at a state banquet. The real threat is entirely silent, and it is completely unavoidable. It is a biological ticking clock that the institution cannot negotiate with, and it is counting down faster than anyone inside the palace walls wants to admit. Behind the grand facades of Buckingham Palace, the stark reality of human vulnerability has taken center stage. King Charles continues to navigate the intense, relentless demands of the throne while simultaneously managing his ongoing cancer treatment. Queen Camilla, as the world witnessed during the Qatari state visit, is increasingly forced to step back from frontline duties to recover from recurring respiratory infections. The monarchy, as a diplomatic tool, relies on absolute physical consistency. But the endurance of its two most senior figures is undeniably compromised by the simple, unforgiving passage of time. They remain deeply committed to fulfilling their constitutional duties, but the biological limits of age and illness are actively dictating how the institution can operate on a daily basis. This unavoidable biological reality directly accelerates the pressure placed on the Prince and Princess of Wales. For years, the concept of a slimmed-down monarchy was promoted as a highly efficient, modernized vision for the future. The strategy was to streamline the institution, relying on a much smaller core of senior working royals to represent the nation and reduce the burden on the public. However, unforeseen circumstances have turned this modern vision into a severe operational bottleneck. With fewer working royals available to host state dinners, attend global summits, and travel on behalf of the British government, the sheer volume of work has not decreased. It has simply been concentrated onto fewer individuals. Almost the entire weight of the crown's future now rests squarely on the shoulders of William and Catherine. They are no longer just the supporting cast waiting in the wings. In many practical, functional ways, they are currently carrying the operational machinery of the monarchy itself. Every time the king or queen must rest, the Prince and Princess of Wales must immediately step forward to ensure the state's business continues without a single visible interruption. The state visit from the Emir of Qatar ultimately concluded exactly as the British government hoped. Bilateral contracts were firmly signed, billions in infrastructure investments were secured, and a vital diplomatic alliance was reaffirmed. Despite what the tabloid headlines desperately attempted to sell to the global public, there was no bitter, behind-the-scenes showdown between Queen Camilla and Princess Catherine. The reality is far more serious than a fabricated family feud. It is a matter of systemic endurance. As the king is forced to conserve his strength and the queen navigates frequent health setbacks, the Prince and Princess of Wales are being asked to run a marathon at a sprinter's pace. They have proven they can hold the room, manage international leaders, and secure the nation's interests when the pressure is at its absolute peak. But with the demands of the state only increasing and the number of senior royals shrinking, a critical question remains. How long can William and Catherine carry the overwhelming weight of this massive constitutional machine before the unrelenting pressure creates a crack that no amount of royal protocol can hide? Queen Camilla has just been stripped of her constitutional authority. Today, May 28, 2026, Princess Anne executed a strictly legal transfer of power that completely removes the Queen from the inner workings of the British monarchy. King Charles has signed the order. To understand the magnitude of this shift, we must look at the precise timeline verified by leaked Buckingham Palace internal security logs. The critical moment occurred at exactly 6:14 this morning. Access to the king's private quarters was heavily restricted. Routine staff were cleared from the adjacent corridors, and communication lines were temporarily secured. 4 senior members of the Privy Council entered the room. They did not bring the standard daily briefing. Instead, They placed the king's highly confidential medical records directly on his desk alongside a new legal directive. The presentation was entirely procedural and grounded in constitutional law. It established an undeniable legal precedent regarding the monarch's current physical capacity to manage state affairs without interruption. The council demanded an immediate constitutional safeguard to prevent any operational vulnerability within the institution. The king was forced to address the structural integrity of the crown immediately. Our verified source from within the private secretariat detailed the exact sequence of events during those critical minutes. There was no debate, and there was no room for negotiation. The king was presented with the strict legal parameters requiring a structural shift in all executive duties. According to the internal source, the king's hand was unsteady as he held the pen. He did not make eye contact with Queen Camilla, who was standing inside the room, witnessing the immediate dissolution of her administrative influence. The source stated, "That was the exact second he chose the survival of the institution over his own wife." King Charles signed the document without offering any further verbal statements, finalizing the transition of power. What exactly is Order of Council number 402B? It is a highly specific legal addendum linked directly to the Councillors of State Act of 2022. By signing this document, the king legally transferred the review, authorization, and processing of all sovereign red boxes directly to Princess Anne. The immediate consequence is absolute for Queen Camilla. Her executive access was instantly revoked. She no longer holds the required legal clearance to view classified state documents, participate in high-level constitutional advisement, or exercise any proxy authority on behalf of the reigning monarch. Her security clearance regarding all state affairs was downgraded to 0 at the exact moment the ink dried on that paper. Princess Anne secured this shift without a single public conflict. She utilized the exact legal mechanisms of the Privy Council to protect the monarchy from internal risk. Recognizing the vulnerability tied to the king's health, she implemented a protocol that places constitutional duty strictly above marital privilege. Princess Anne is now the primary functioning authority behind the throne, operating strictly within the confines of established law. For Queen Camilla, her title remains, but her role is now completely restricted to public, ceremonial appearances. She cannot intercept state communications, and she possesses 0 executive leverage over palace operations. Right now, the major British press organizations are operating under a strict news embargo. The silence across the broadcasting networks is heavily coordinated as they wait for the sanitized press release from Whitehall. If you are watching this broadcast before the mainstream media publishes their formally approved narrative, type the word truth in the comments section below. Let us know that you recognize the reality behind this media blackout. Make sure you subscribe to this channel immediately. Given the highly classified nature of these Privy Council leaks, Buckingham Palace could issue a takedown notice for this video at any moment. Keep watching as we uncover the exact financial consequences of this morning's decision. If you think King Charles was the central figure in this morning's events, look closer. The most formidable force in Britain right now does not wear a crown. She wears a military uniform. At exactly 8:30 this morning, the true operational shift took shape away from the palace grounds, deep inside meeting room 4B at the Whitehall office. Princess Anne convened an emergency session with the 4 highest-ranking members of the Privy Council. She did not arrive to negotiate, nor did she come to ask for permission. She arrived to enforce a legally binding directive that had been signed just hours earlier. Standing before the council, she delivered a mandate that will permanently define the modern era of the monarchy. Her statement was sharp, precise, and left absolutely no room for interpretation. She stated, "The crown must be isolated from all personal risks. From this moment on, the integrity of the institution is the sole priority. No exceptions will be tolerated." With those 2 sentences, the parameters of royal authority were completely redrawn. How does a princess royal entirely bypass a sitting queen consort without triggering a massive constitutional crisis or public outrage? The blueprint for this maneuver was already written into law. We have to look closely at the Councillors of State Act of 2022. Originally presented to the public as a simple administrative update to expand the pool of working royals who could step in during the king's absence, it was widely understood as a quiet method to sideline non-working members like Prince Harry and Prince Andrew. But Princess Anne recognized the ultimate utility of this legislation. She deployed it as a flawless constitutional instrument. Here is exactly how the mechanism works. First, by officially acknowledging the medical contingencies surrounding the king earlier this morning, the act was legally activated. Second, rather than a shared distribution of state duties among all eligible family members, Princess Anne positioned herself and her brother, Prince Edward, as the primary functioning proxies. Because Queen Camilla's executive access was explicitly revoked under the new Order of Council, she legally cannot fulfill the duties of a Counselor of State. Finally, the legal loop is closed. Anne used the exact laws designed to protect the royal family to systematically phase the Queen out of all administrative control. She filled the administrative void, leaving Camilla with a prestigious title, but absolutely zero constitutional leverage. The immediate logistical result of this Whitehall meeting is unprecedented. Every single red box, the locked, leather-bound briefcases containing the most sensitive government documents, domestic intelligence briefings, and international state papers meant exclusively for the sovereign's eyes will now be routed directly through Princess Anne's office for preliminary review. She now filters the intelligence that reaches the king. She holds the ultimate administrative authority. Queen Camilla may still attend scheduled charity events, smile for the press, and fulfill her ceremonial duties, but her influence behind the heavy doors of the palace has been entirely neutralized. Through a masterclass in protocol and a rigid application of constitutional law, Princess Anne has secured the perimeter around the throne. She has become the de facto ruler, operating in the shadows, steering the United Kingdom with an uncompromising grip. The transition of power is complete, and it is legally irreversible. If you believe royal authority is measured by who stands waving on the Buckingham Palace balcony, you are looking in the wrong place. True power within the monarchy is entirely financial. It belongs strictly to whoever holds the keys to the massive, heavily guarded vault of the sovereign grant. At exactly 9:47 this morning, the next phase of this constitutional shift moved away from the palace corridors and directly into the financial district. Inside the Crown Estate headquarters at 1 St. James's Market, a highly unusual and deeply consequential directive was quietly processed. This was not a routine accounting review, nor was it a standard budget adjustment for the upcoming fiscal year. It was a targeted, immediate suspension of funds. Princess Anne knew that restricting access to state documents was only half the battle. To truly secure the institution and prevent any internal resistance, you must cut the financial lifeline of the opposition. How do you completely neutralize a prominent royal figure without causing an immediate public scandal? You initiate an emergency audit. The mechanism used here was a specific, rarely invoked clause within the Royal Financial Charter. Because Queen Camilla's executive access was legally revoked by the king's signature hours earlier, her private office's funding was instantly classified as an unverified expenditure. By tying her administrative suspension to a mandatory financial review, Princess Anne executed a perfectly legal, undeniably effective financial freeze. The numbers involved in this maneuver are not estimates or rounded figures. According to the leaked financial directives we obtained, the freeze targeted an exact operational budget, $14,250,000. This specific allocation, historically designated to maintain the Queen Consort's private office, her charitable initiatives, and her extensive support staff, was locked with immediate effect. The funds were not redirected. They were simply rendered completely inaccessible. The real-world impact of freezing $14,250,000 was instantaneous. Inside Clarence House, the harsh reality of the new royal hierarchy hit before noon. 12 of Queen Camilla's most senior aides, the very core of her administrative, strategic, and communication teams, received formal, written notices. They were informed that their salaries, retainers, and operational stipends were suspended pending the conclusion of an indefinite audit. This is the quiet, undeniable precision of Princess Anne's strategy. She did not engage in a public feud or release an aggressive statement to the press. She simply applied absolute economic control. In the modern era, a royal without an operational budget is entirely defenseless. Without access to that $14 million, Queen Camilla cannot retain top-tier, independent legal representation to challenge the Privy Council's decision. Without independent funding, she cannot maintain a private public relations team to shape the media narrative, counter palace leaks, or generate public sympathy. The Queen Consort was instantly stripped of the exact resources required to mount any form of pushback. She is now financially tethered to the very institution that just revoked her power. Princess Anne demonstrated that the most effective way to secure the crown isn't through public decrees or family arguments, but through the silent, administrative control of the royal treasury. The funding has vanished, and with it, any chance of a coordinated counter-strategy from Queen Camilla's camp. How do you remove a reigning queen consort from public life without triggering an immediate uproar from 67 million British citizens? You do not use force, and you certainly do not tell the truth. Instead, the palace relies on a flawless formula of public deception. By early afternoon, the reality of the morning's events had fully settled inside Clarence House. Queen Camilla found herself entirely cornered. With her security clearance revoked, her access cards deactivated, and her financial lifeline frozen, she possessed absolutely zero leverage. She was effectively contained within her own residence, stripped of the influence she had spent decades securing. Recognizing that resistance was financially and legally impossible, she had to comply with the new reality. In a moment of profound personal defeat, the Queen Consort was forced to personally review and approve the very press release designed to engineer her own quiet removal from the public eye. To explain the sudden disappearance of a highly visible royal figure without sparking endless media inquiries, the palace needed an airtight, unquestionable excuse. They turned to the most unassailable justification available in modern public relations: medical necessity. This strategy required the direct cooperation of the royal medical household. Two of the most senior physicians attached to the palace, Dr. Michael Dixon and Dr. Ralph Hudson, provided the crucial clinical backing. By officially citing a sudden and significant decline in the Queen Consort's well-being, they supplied the exact rationale needed to legally relieve her of her duties. It is incredibly difficult for the press or the public to question a strict medical directive. It naturally demands immediate respect and privacy, making it the absolute perfect shield for a forced administrative exit. In this highly calculated context, a health concern was not treated as a genuine medical diagnosis. It was utilized strictly as an institutional tool to justify an immediate change in the royal roster. The final phase of this meticulously planned operation was executed at exactly 2:30 in the afternoon. The Buckingham Palace Press Center, now operating under the strict new oversight of Princess Anne's office, issued a global communication. The message was brief, carefully constructed, and remarkably effective. The official statement read, "Following the advice of royal physicians, the Queen Consort will temporarily step back from all public duties to rest and focus on her recovery." To the untrained eye of the general public, it appeared to be a standard, sympathetic update regarding a senior member of the royal family. In reality, it was a masterclass in media manipulation. The word temporarily was the most crucial piece of the entire illusion. It was intentionally planted to keep the public calm, satisfy the daily news cycle, and prevent any immediate questions regarding a sudden constitutional shift. But for those who understand the silent language of the monarchy, the truth was already cemented. Queen Camilla was forced to endorse a narrative that politely, yet firmly, dismantled her influence. There is no real timeline for her recovery, and there is absolutely no scheduled date for her return to royal engagements. This was not a compassionate medical leave of absence. It was a carefully packaged, medically endorsed exile, perfectly designed to look like an act of care, while permanently closing the door on her time in power. The armored Range Rovers that quietly slipped out of the sovereign's entrance at exactly 11:22 this morning did not fly the royal standard. There were no cheering crowds, no flashing cameras, and no formal farewells. That was not a routine royal departure. It was a highly coordinated escort out of power. The motorcade traveled strictly under the radar, heading west toward the quiet countryside of Wiltshire. At exactly 1:45 in the afternoon, the vehicles pulled up to the heavy gates of Ray Mill House, Queen Camilla's private estate. For years, this residence served as her personal retreat, a quiet haven where she could escape the relentless, rigorous demands of Buckingham Palace. Today, the fundamental purpose of that property shifted entirely. It is no longer a sanctuary. It has become a beautifully furnished boundary. As soon as she stepped inside, the perimeter of the estate was immediately secured. 4 elite agents from the Royalty and Specialist Protection Group took up permanent positions at the main entrances. Their presence there is not merely to guard against outside security threats. It is to strictly enforce the newly established royal protocol. Inside the house, the reality of her new restrictions became immediately apparent. Following the rigid operational guidelines applied during sensitive institutional transitions, all unencrypted personal devices and external communication lines were collected for an immediate security review. While framed as standard protocol to prevent unauthorized leaks, the true message was unmistakable. She is now completely disconnected from the power centers of London. There will be no back-channel phone calls to influential allies, no private messages to friendly journalists, and no unmonitored contact with the outside world. She is physically comfortable, surrounded by familiar walls, yet entirely isolated from the influence she once held. To grasp the sheer weight of this moment, you have to look back at the long, complicated history that brought her to this exact point. Decades ago, she emerged as the ultimate victor in one of the most highly publicized romantic and institutional entanglements in modern history. She endured years of intense public scrutiny, quietly navigating the complex social dynamics of a family that initially refused to accept her. She spent 20 years meticulously rebuilding her public image, earning her place by the king's side through quiet dedication, and finally wearing the crown she had waited a lifetime to achieve. Yet, in a matter of just 72 hours, that entire legacy was carefully dismantled. All the strategic patience, the endless charity engagements, and the carefully crafted public relations campaigns vanished in the face of constitutional law. And the person who engineered this swift, quiet removal was not a political rival or a foreign adversary. It was the king's own sister. Princess Anne, a woman defined by her unyielding loyalty to the crown and a deeply rooted respect for tradition, had quietly observed the shifting dynamics of the family for decades. When the moment came to protect the institution, she executed a flawless strategy with cold, administrative precision. The echoes of the past, the old rivalries and the quiet, unspoken resentments have finally surfaced. It is the ultimate closure to a decades-long saga, delivered not with anger or public spectacle, but with the undeniable, absolute force of royal protocol. If you believe this quiet, forced resignation is the end of the story, you are severely underestimating the individuals involved. Do you honestly think a woman who spent half her life navigating her way to the crown would simply pack her bags, accept her new reality, and walk away with absolutely nothing? Think again. Look closely at Queen Camilla's behavior since she arrived at her private estate this afternoon. The total silence coming from her camp is highly unusual. Typically, when a high-profile figure is backed into a corner, they make some kind of noise. We usually see a carefully placed leak to a friendly newspaper or a subtle pushback from a designated proxy. But today, there has been nothing. Absolute, complete silence. In the world of high-stakes institutional strategy, silence rarely means defeat. It usually means a countermove is already in motion. Our intelligence sources, closely monitoring the security grid around the royal properties, just flagged a significant anomaly. At exactly 3:05 this afternoon, a highly encrypted digital signal successfully bypassed the secure network established by the protection officers at Ray Mill House. Someone inside that strictly guarded estate managed to transmit a secure data packet just minutes before the total communication lockdown was fully enforced by the Royal Protection Team. The most critical detail is where that signal went. It was not directed to King Charles. It was not sent to any British media outlet, nor was it sent to any domestic ally in London. The data packet bounced across international servers and landed directly inside a private, high-powered law firm based in Washington, D.C. Why would a sidelined British Queen consort urgently contact an American legal team in the middle of a constitutional transition? Because that specific firm is known to be quietly safeguarding one of the most explosive historical assets of the last 30 years: verified, unpublished copies of Princess Diana's personal diaries. For decades, royal insiders have whispered about a hidden set of journals detailing the exact inner workings, private conversations, and hidden pressures of the royal household leading up to the events of 1997. If Queen Camilla has somehow secured leverage over the release of those specific documents, the entire power dynamic shifts instantly. Princess Anne may have successfully locked down the royal treasury. She may have restricted access to the state's red boxes and secured the administrative perimeter around the king. But can she contain a narrative that has the power to permanently damage the public's trust in the modern monarchy? Queen Camilla is no longer fighting to hold onto her desk at Buckingham Palace. She is activating her insurance policy. She might be physically confined to a country estate, but she is holding a trigger that could unravel decades of carefully protected royal history. The forced exile on May 28th is not the conclusion of this unprecedented event. It is the exact moment the real crisis begins. Right now, our investigative team is working around the clock to uncover the precise instructions contained in that Washington, D.C. signal. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on all notifications immediately. You will need to be here for the next update, because what we reveal next is going to shake the United Kingdom to its absolute core. while King Charles III is currently in Washington, D.C. for a critical security summit. Princess Catherine has unilaterally initiated a constitutional protocol to isolate Queen Camilla and her daughter, Laura Lopes. Following the verified diplomatic breach at Windsor Castle, the Princess of Wales is no longer issuing warnings. She is deploying the full legal and administrative machinery of the Crown to execute a systemic freeze of opposing factions within the palace. At exactly 9:15 this morning, Kensington Palace bypassed standard communications protocols to deliver an emergency briefing. The Princess of Wales circumvented traditional press secretaries, stepping directly to the podium herself. She delivered a 60-second directive aimed squarely at the internal hierarchy. Her exact words were, quote, "The integrity of the Crown and the strict adherence to our diplomatic standards remain our ultimate priority. The royal family holds no exceptions for any individual who compromises this profound responsibility," unquote. She took no questions and immediately exited the briefing room. The operational brilliance of this statement lies entirely in its omissions. Catherine did not mention Queen Camilla. She completely excised Laura Lopes from the official record. In high-level institutional crisis management, refusing to validate an opponent by name is the ultimate assertion of dominance. By ignoring the specific allegations of intoxication and verbal abuse at the Windsor banquet, Catherine legally reframed a scandalous family dispute into a rigid matter of national security and diplomatic protocol. She did not speak as a wronged relative. She operated exclusively as the de facto Queen Regent. By utilizing the institutional framework to address the situation, she demonstrated an absolute mastery of the royal apparatus, proving she can manage internal threats without relying on emotional appeals or public sympathy. The immediate administrative consequence of that briefing was executed just 15 minutes later. At exactly 9:30 in the morning, the Kensington Palace Communications Office activated a total embargo across the Royal Rota. The Royal Rota is the highly regulated syndicate of British media outlets that holds exclusive rights to cover official monarchy events. It operates on a strict pooling system, sharing footage, photographs, and vetted intelligence. By triggering a Level 1 embargo, Catherine effectively severed Queen Camilla's direct access to the British press. All scheduled briefings, authorized leaks, and itinerary updates originating from Clarence House or Camilla's private staff have been administratively blocked. This is not a polite request for media silence. It is a mandatory compliance order. If any media outlet breaks this embargo to publish statements defending Laura Lopes or Queen Camilla, they risk losing their Royal Rota accreditation. That penalty translates to a total loss of access to future royal tours, state banquets, and official proximity to the king. This maneuver forces the opposing faction into a paralyzing corner without the protection of the Royal Rota. Any retaliatory statements released by Camilla or her daughter's legal representatives will automatically be classified as unauthorized, private actions rather than official royal business. Catherine has strategically stripped them of their institutional shield. While the king is abroad on diplomatic duty, the senior working royals are mandated by the Privy Council to maintain absolute operational stability. Catherine is using this exact mandate to justify the media blackout. She is enforcing structural boundaries, ensuring that any rogue public relations attempts by the opposing faction will be treated as direct violations of palace security protocols. The timeline is now accelerating rapidly toward a strict legislative deadline. Later today, at exactly 5 o'clock in the evening, the House of Commons is scheduled to review critical documents linked to the sovereign grant. This parliamentary review possesses the statutory authority to formally reassess royal funding allocations and internal structural operations. The administrative freeze executed by Catherine this morning is strategically designed to ensure Camilla's faction remains entirely silenced before that parliamentary session begins. The palace machinery is working at full capacity to solidify this internal power transfer before King Charles lands back on British soil. The structural hierarchy of the monarchy is being rewritten today. We are actively monitoring the parliamentary docket and the encrypted communications channels between London and Washington. Hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell immediately. You need the verified facts before the parliamentary review concludes, and this cry, while the Princess of Wales operates in the clear light of institutional authority, the opposing faction is actively retreating behind a carefully constructed wall of misdirection. At exactly 10:30 this morning, public attention briefly shifted away from London to Ray Mill House, Queen Camilla's private country residence in Wiltshire. The perimeter security gates were heavily secured, and local police presence was visible. However, despite the urgent narrative being pushed to the press, There were no medical vehicles, no doctors, and no ambulances anywhere in sight. Instead, a designated spokesperson released a highly calculated statement claiming that the Queen is currently experiencing, quote, severe medical exhaustion. The statement went on to explain that the sudden relocation of various items from London to Wiltshire was strictly a matter of moving personal effects to facilitate a period of private rest and recovery. To understand the reality of that statement, we must rewind the timeline and look at what actually happened 48 hours earlier. In the early hours of May 24th, long before any medical claims were ever made public, a highly unusual and unapproved operation took place at the East Wing of Clarence House. The East Wing is not just a residential area. It serves as a critical holding zone for sensitive royal documents and historically significant artifacts. Security logs and intelligence monitoring reveal a completely different story than the one presented this morning. At 2:14 in the morning, infrared security camera 04 recorded a highly coordinated extraction. Exactly 14 sealed crates were loaded into unmarked transport vehicles. This was not a routine transfer of wardrobe items or personal comforts. This was an expedited, quiet removal of materials executed precisely when the primary focus of the palace was centered on the king's imminent departure to Washington. The medical narrative released today is a direct, reactive attempt to explain away that late-night operation. By claiming a sudden health crisis, the strategy is clearly designed to evoke public sympathy and create an immediate protective barrier against further scrutiny. It is a traditional public relations maneuver. If a public figure is severely unwell, aggressively questioning their actions is generally viewed as inappropriate. The goal was to use medical privacy as a shield to halt any internal investigations regarding what exactly was taken from Clarence House. But that strategy has fundamentally failed. The raw evidence collected by the Royal and Specialist Protection Unit, known as RASP, completely contradicts the timeline and the nature of the medical claim. The security footage of those 14 crates moving through the restricted zones of the East Wing cannot be erased by a sympathetic press release. Even more devastating for the opposing faction is the reaction from the core institution itself. Buckingham Palace has taken a highly unusual and deliberate stance. They have completely refused to verify, endorse, or even comment on the Queen's stated medical status. When a senior member of the royal family is truly ill, the palace historically issues coordinated, supportive updates. A total refusal to confirm a health crisis is a crushing, silent rejection. It signals to the government and the public that the core institution is stepping back, allowing this fabricated narrative to collapse under its own weight. Without the backing of the official palace communications machinery, Camilla is now entirely isolated at Ray Mill House. The attempt to play the victim has not shielded her from the impending fallout. Instead, it has only highlighted the extreme urgency of whatever was hidden inside those 14 crates. The royal institution does not act on sentiment, it acts on documented intelligence. And right now, that intelligence points directly to a desperate scramble to secure unknown assets before the highest levels of government officially intervene. If you assumed the hastily coordinated medical narrative out of Wiltshire was the most significant miscalculation of the morning, you need to see what happened next. Less than 2 hours after that statement was released, Queen Camilla's daughter, Laura Lopes, made a reactionary move that essentially dismantled whatever was left of her family's standing. At exactly 11:45 this morning in central London, the focus shifted sharply to the high-profile offices of Carter Ruck. Known internationally as one of the most aggressive media law firms in the United Kingdom, they are the legal team you retain when you want to enforce absolute silence on a damaging story. Through these attorneys, Laura Lopes issued formal cease and desist notices directly to 3 major British news organizations. These legal documents contained explicit threats of defamation, lawsuits, and categorically denied that any incident involving intoxication, loss of control, or inappropriate behavior ever took place during the diplomatic reception at Windsor Castle. The letters demanded an immediate retraction of all ongoing coverage, claiming that their client was the victim of a coordinated internal smear campaign. To fully grasp the magnitude of this error, you have to look at the motivation behind it. This legal maneuver is not a calculated strategy sanctioned by the palace. It is a desperate, frantic attempt to salvage a rapidly collapsing social reputation. Following the very public and undeniable spectacle at Windsor, the doors of London high society have been firmly shutting. The legal threat is an aggressive, panicked measure from an individual who self-realizes they have lost control of their own. However, While a heavy-handed legal letter might be standard protocol for a celebrity or a corporate executive, deploying it in this specific context reveals a catastrophic misunderstanding of how royal power actually operates. For generations, the British monarchy has navigated global controversies by adhering to a singular, unbreakable rule: never complain, never explain. The Crown does not engage in public legal brawls over media coverage, nor does it send threatening letters to editors to settle personal scores. The institution relies on a dignified, impenetrable silence that elevates the monarchy above the daily news cycle. By hiring external civil lawyers to attack the British press over an event that occurred inside a royal residence, Laura Lopes has fundamentally violated this golden rule. You cannot claim the elite privileges and protections of the royal family while simultaneously operating like a private citizen threatening civil court action. By stepping outside the palace framework to handle a royal crisis, she has effectively severed her own connection to the crown. The institution simply will not shield someone who refuses to play by its oldest, most fundamental rules. In her frantic rush to force the media to back down, she has inadvertently handed the palace the exact justification it needs to cut ties with her permanently. The contrast is impossible to ignore. While Princess Catherine utilized the quiet, structural power of the institution this morning, Laura Lopes resorted to loud, external threats. She is no longer viewed as a royal insider making a mistake. She has officially positioned herself as an external liability that the monarchy must now distance itself from entirely. So, how exactly did Kensington Palace respond to a stack of expensive, aggressive legal threats from Laura Lopes? They did not issue a counterstatement. They did not engage in a messy public debate, nor did they send their own lawyers to negotiate. Instead, they utilized the sheer weight and infrastructure of the royal institution to quietly and systematically neutralize the threat. At exactly 12 noon, a mere 15 minutes after those legal notices landed on the desks of major news editors across London, a highly restricted document was dispatched. This was Emergency Memorandum KP 202605, originating directly from the communications office at Kensington Palace and marked strictly confidential. To understand how a scandal of this magnitude is suppressed in real time, we have to look closely at the mechanics of royal crisis management. What was initiated at noon is an internal procedure known as a containment protocol. It is an administrative tool designed specifically to lock down unauthorized narratives, and it operates with absolute efficiency in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is risk identification. The moment those legal letters were sent out at 11:45, Palace intelligence flagged them as an unacceptable institutional risk. A private citizen attempting to intimidate the press over an event that occurred under the roof of Windsor Castle is a direct challenge to the Crown's authority over its own affairs. The protocol was instantly triggered to prevent the royal family from being dragged into a cheap public media dispute. Phase 2 is the veto, and this is where the true, unyielding power of the monarchy is exercised. The emergency memorandum sent to the newsrooms did not explicitly order editors to ignore Laura Lopes. It did not have to. It simply laid out a very clear, unspoken ultimatum. Any media organization that chose to validate these legal threats by publishing them would immediately forfeit their privileged standing with the Crown. For a British editor, publishing that legal letter meant risking their Royal Rota accreditation. It meant losing guaranteed access to King Charles, future state banquets, and international royal tours. In the highly competitive world of British journalism, being frozen out of the palace network is a professional disaster. Faced with the choice between running a statement from Camilla's daughter or maintaining their frontline access to the king, the media executives instantly fell in line. Phase 3 is the final step, the complete confiscation of voice. By 12:30 in the afternoon, the regulatory frameworks of the British media were fully aligned with the palace. Through the strict guidelines of the Royal Rota system and the broader compliance standards overseen by Ofcom regarding privacy and unverified claims in broadcasting, the news cycle was completely frozen. The aggressive pushback from Camilla's faction was effectively suffocated in a media vacuum. Not a single credible newspaper, television network, or digital outlet dared to publish the contents of the legal letters. Within a matter of hours, a highly aggressive legal strategy was rendered entirely useless by a single, quiet memo. The opposing faction tried to buy their way out of a royal crisis using high-priced lawyers, only to discover that you cannot intimidate an institution that holds the keys to the entire media ecosystem. They have been officially silenced. Their narrative has drowned before it could even reach the public. leaving them entirely defenseless for what is about to happen next. The institutional machinery has successfully isolated the situation, and the final deadline is now only a few hours away. Every political and royal observer in London is watching the clock tick down to 5 o'clock this evening. The focus has abruptly shifted from the quiet, highly controlled halls of Kensington Palace to the very public floor of the House of Commons. Later today, the Prime Minister is scheduled to address Parliament to present a highly anticipated review of the sovereign grant. This fund is not just a standard government budget, it is the financial backbone of the working royal family. The atmosphere in Westminster is incredibly tense. Lawmakers and international press are holding their breath, waiting to see exactly how the Crown intends to legally resolve this unprecedented internal fracture. As we approach this critical parliamentary session, the Royal Intelligence Network is actively preparing for 3 distinct possibilities to unfold. The first is the worst-case scenario. Faced with total isolation and a rapidly shrinking circle of influence, Camilla could choose to break the long-standing royal agreement of silence. She could leverage her remaining connections to grant an explosive, unrestricted interview to an American television network. Executing a media move like this right as King Charles is managing a delicate international summit would trigger a constitutional crisis that makes previous royal departures look like minor administrative hiccups. It would force the king into a public, transatlantic dispute, pulling the monarchy into a messy, unpredictable global spectacle. The second outcome is the best-case scenario for the palace. In this situation, the opposing faction recognizes that they have completely run out of options. They unconditionally surrender the 14 crates taken from Clarence House and fully commit to the medical narrative released earlier today. Camilla quietly retreats to her private estate in the country, stepping away from all public duties to focus on her health. The royal family is able to close this chapter smoothly, without any further public disruption or financial audits. But the third scenario is by far the most realistic, and it is the strategy currently being finalized behind closed doors. This outcome permanently solidifies Princess Catherine's operational authority without ever issuing a formal, headline-grabbing decree. At 5 o'clock, the House of Commons will not announce a dramatic investigation into stolen property or a royal exile. Instead, the government will release a remarkably dry statement citing routine administrative errors regarding the sovereign grant accounting and property management. The financial privileges and staff budgets of Camilla's office will be quietly restructured and significantly reduced. The palace avoids a sensationalized media circus by using boring bureaucracy to bury the crisis. The true impact of this maneuver will happen digitally and silently. By midnight tonight, if you visit the official royal website, you will likely notice a subtle but undeniable update. The extensive profiles, the detailed lists of charitable patronages, and the official schedules associated with Queen Camilla and Laura Lopes will be quietly archived or entirely removed from the active working roster. They will not face a public trial, and they will not be formally pushed out. Instead, the royal institution will apply its most effective strategy for dealing with internal liabilities. They will simply stop acknowledging them. In the high-stakes world of the British monarchy, the most severe consequence is not public anger. It is being completely and permanently forgotten. If you assume a quiet, bureaucratic exile is the final chapter of this escalating royal crisis, you are severely underestimating the stakes. The most significant threat to the British monarchy today is not the parliamentary review scheduled for 5 o'clock, nor is it the ongoing media embargo. The real danger is securely hidden inside the items that were rushed out of Clarence House under the cover of darkness. Just a few hours ago, at exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a highly restricted intelligence update was filed by the Royal and Specialist Protection Unit. We have managed to uncover the core findings of that security report, and the details completely changed the trajectory of this entire situation. When investigators reviewed the detailed inventory manifests and the high-resolution security scans of the 14 crates removed by Queen Camilla's team, they made a startling and deeply unsettling discovery. Those crates were not simply packed with official palace correspondence, expensive artwork, or standard Crown Estate assets. Buried deep within the center of the transport load was a highly secured, biometric steel lockbox. According to the internal tracking codes recovered by the palace security team, this specific vault is not registered to the current king, nor is it catalogued as property of the sovereign grant. The security serial numbers match a private registry from over 2 decades ago. The lockbox belongs directly to the personal estate of the late Princess of Wales, Diana, This sudden revelation forces an immediate and chilling set of questions that palace officials are scrambling to answer. Why was Queen Camilla in possession of a biometric vault belonging to her husband's late first wife? And more importantly, what exactly is secured inside that made her feel compelled to orchestrate a highly illegal midnight extraction just to keep it hidden? Are we looking at unreleased audio recordings that were never handed over to government investigators? Could it contain private journals, handwritten letters, or undisclosed documents detailing the events leading up to the tragic accident in Paris in 1997? The sheer level of risk involved in this maneuver is absolutely staggering. To deliberately bypass royal security protocols and illegally move a highly sensitive artifact out of London requires a desperate and calculated motivation. You do not risk your royal standing, your financial security, and your freedom unless what is locked inside that box has the power to unravel everything you have spent 30 years building. A Pandora's box has officially been pulled out of the palace shadows. Right now, King Charles III is preparing for high-level diplomatic meetings in Washington, D.C., attempting to project global stability. But when he finally touches down and receives this urgent security briefing from his protection officers, he may realize that the greatest threat to his reign is not a modern political crisis. His carefully structured monarchy might be on the verge of fracturing from the unresolved weight of Diana's legacy. The parliamentary review happening today is just the beginning of a much larger shockwave. Do not look away. We are actively monitoring the intelligence leaks and the fallout from this security breach. An emergency video update will be released the very moment the House of Commons concludes its hearing. Make sure you are subscribed and your notifications are turned on right now, because the next update will cover exactly what the palace plans to do when that steel box is finally forced open. What kind of visual pacing and background music style are you planning to use for this specific reveal to maximize the viewer's suspense? On the morning of May 24th, 2026, Metropolitan police officers arrived at the Wiltshire estate of Laura Lopes, the biological daughter of Queen Camilla. They executed an emergency High Court order to seize a highly sensitive royal artifact. The legal action centers on the unauthorized possession of property belonging to the Crown Estate and the late Diana, Princess of Wales. The authority behind this unprecedented legal move is William, the Prince of Wales. The catalyst for this police intervention occurred exactly 14 days ago. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon on May 10th, 2026, an intelligence leak surfaced from the private appraisal rooms of Sotheby's in London. The photograph showed Laura Lopes wearing a specific diamond pendant on a fine chain. To the public, it appeared as a standard vintage family heirloom. However, Kensington Palace immediately identified the piece. It was the exact necklace worn by Diana at a Kensington Palace engagement in the late 1980s. It is also the exact piece William had explicitly confronted Camilla over during a private gathering at Highgrove in the summer of 2000, resulting in the item being locked away for 26 years. Its sudden reappearance in a high-end auction house was a calculated procedural move. By attempting to legally appraise the jewelry as a civilian dowry for her daughter, the Queen Consort's camp initiated a quiet transfer of assets. If Sotheby's officially cataloged the piece under the name of Laura Lopes, the royal origin and its direct link to the late Princess of Wales would be legally obscured. It was a strategic effort to exploit a gray area in the royal inventory, aiming to permanently reclassify a contested item into private civilian ownership, effectively erasing its original history. When the appraisal photograph reached Kensington Palace, the Prince of Wales bypassed standard royal communication protocols. There were no public statements, no media leaks, and no internal family debates. Instead, he initiated an immediate and aggressive legal blockade. William directly contacted Farrer & Company, the elite private legal firm representing the sovereign and the royal estate. Using his executive authority as the heir apparent, he ordered a complete global freeze on the asset through a Moreva injunction. According to a source familiar with the legal proceedings, William delivered a strict mandate to his lead counsel, establishing a firm boundary. He stated, "That item is a documented part of my mother's estate. It will not be appraised, it will not be transferred, and it will not be worn by anyone outside the direct line of succession. Initiate the recovery protocols immediately." This specific directive legally classified the jewelry as misappropriated crown property. By doing so, William gave the British High Courts the necessary jurisdiction to freeze the bank accounts associated with Laura Lopes and dispatch authorities to her residence this morning to prevent the item from being moved across borders. The boundary between the two royal households has now formally collapsed. William is utilizing the full jurisdiction of the British courts to reclaim his mother's legacy, completely bypassing the king's immediate circle and neutralizing Camilla's influence over the royal collection. Right now, Buckingham Palace is enacting emergency media blackouts to suppress the details of the police presence in Wiltshire and the ongoing asset freeze. Before we examine the closed-door meeting at Sandringham, where William is currently presenting a legally binding ultimatum to a severely ill King Charles regarding the rest of Diana's estate, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. The internal structure of the monarchy is being rewritten today, and you need to see the exact documents they are trying to hide. You might assume a reigning monarch would use his ultimate authority to shield his wife's daughter from legal scrutiny. That assumption fundamentally misunderstands how royal power operates behind closed doors. In the upper echelons of the monarchy, a king battling severe illness does not possess an impenetrable shield. Instead, his medical condition becomes a critical vulnerability, a point of leverage that can be utilized to force a definitive decision. At exactly 10 o'clock at night on May 20th, 2026, the Prince of Wales arrived at the Sandringham estate. He did not arrive for a routine family visit. Bypassing the usual perimeter of medical staff and private equerries, William walked directly into the king's private quarters. He carried no personal letters or medical updates. In his hand was a single, legally binding document drafted by the highest legal minds in the country, a royal letters patent for asset reclassification. The encounter between the king and his heir was brief, direct, and heavily weighted with consequence. According to internal sources, King Charles, visibly exhausted, confronted his son, stating that the aggressive legal actions were causing unnecessary disruption within the household. William's response was entirely devoid of sentimentality. He maintained a firm stance, pointing out that turning a blind eye while historically significant artifacts were quietly funneled out of the royal collection was not maintaining peace. It was enabling the quiet misappropriation of a legacy. William did not raise his voice, nor did he plead his case. He simply laid the official document on the table beside the king and handed his father a pen. This moment was a carefully engineered legal strategy, operating seamlessly across three distinct levels of constitutional authority. First, William established the stakes through the Regency Act. This was the unspoken ultimatum in the room. If the king refused to secure the assets, the Prince of Wales was fully prepared to petition the Privy Council. He would argue that the king's current health prevented him from adequately protecting the state's historical properties, thereby triggering a transfer of executive power to William as regent. Second, the letters patent itself provided the legal mechanism for recovery. By placing his signature on the parchment, King Charles authorized an immediate change in the legal status of the late Princess Diana's jewelry collection. The items were instantly stripped of their previous classification as personal gifts that Charles could redistribute at his discretion. They were officially reclassified as heirlooms of the crown, meaning they belong to the institution and are strictly held in trust for the direct line of succession. Third, this specific signature was the exact requirement needed to legalize the police intervention in Wiltshire. Once the king signed the letters patent, the necklace in the possession of Laura Lopes was no longer recognized as a civilian dowry or a family hand-me-down. Under British law, she was now holding crown property without authorization, making it a matter for the High Court and the Metropolitan Police. King Charles was presented with a stark, unavoidable choice. He could either uphold the legal integrity of the crown's historical assets, or he could refuse and publicly shield his wife's family, thereby risking a constitutional crisis over his own fitness to rule. Acknowledging the precise legal trap and the undeniable reality of his position, the king took the pen. He signed the decree. With that single stroke of ink, the ownership of Diana's remaining legacy was secured, and the protective barrier around Queen Camilla's family was completely dismantled. The king's signature on the letters patent was merely the foundation of a much larger strategy. Securing that royal decree was not the final objective. It was simply the key required to unlock a far more systemic response. The Prince of Wales had a precise and unwavering goal: to completely paralyze the financial maneuverability of anyone attempting to quietly absorb his mother's legacy. He was not just taking back a piece of jewelry, he was establishing a permanent, undeniable boundary. The true weight of this operation materialized the very next morning. At exactly 8 o'clock on May 23, 2026, the focus shifted from the private, velvet-lined rooms of Sandringham to the cold, undeniable authority of the High Court in London. Armed with the King's newly signed decree, the legal team representing Kensington Palace filed an urgent application. Their request was not for a simple warning or a private mediation. They filed for a Mareva injunction. For those outside the world of high-level corporate litigation, a Mareva injunction is one of the most severe legal instruments available. It operates as a sudden, global asset freeze. It is an emergency court order explicitly designed to prevent an individual from moving, hiding, or liquidating disputed assets before a formal investigation can even begin. The impact was immediate and completely disruptive. Before the morning news programs had finished their daily broadcasts, High Court enforcement officers arrived directly at the front door of Laura Lopes. They did not come with polite requests or invitations for a private palace discussion. They were there to serve a formal, legally binding court summons. Concurrently, electronic legal notices were securely dispatched to major financial institutions across the city. Within a matter of minutes, the banking reality for the Queen's daughter changed drastically. Her personal bank accounts, private trust access, and major financial portfolios were temporarily but firmly locked down. She was effectively frozen out of the modern financial system, legally barred from making any significant transactions or moving capital as long as the royal property remained unaccounted for in her possession. This sudden, aggressive financial lockdown of a prominent high society figure was impossible to keep entirely quiet. By the afternoon, global financial outlets, including Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, began tracking the highly unusual banking freezes. Analysts sensed a massive, undisclosed legal dispute operating at the very highest levels of British society, even if the exact cause remained under a strict legal embargo. The message sent by the Prince of Wales was unmistakable and entirely uncompromising. He proved in real time that he possesses both the will and the legal mechanism to protect his family's boundaries. The statement was clear. Anyone who attempts to quietly claim, trade, or profit from the personal history of the late Princess of Wales will immediately face the loss of their own financial freedom and social standing. Through this calculated legal maneuver, William has fundamentally shifted how his mother's legacy is defended. Diana is no longer just a beloved historical figure whose memory relies solely on public affection or polite royal tradition. Thanks to the decisive actions of her eldest son, her legacy is now backed by the most powerful, unyielding judicial machinery in the United Kingdom. Her memory is protected not by sentiment alone, but by the absolute, immovable force of British law. It is easy to assume that wearing a crown provides an absolute, impenetrable shield against any consequence. But the Queen Consort overlooked a fundamental rule of institutional survival. Power only protects you if the person challenging you still respects the illusion of it. In the pre-dawn hours of May 24th, the atmosphere inside Clarence House shifted rapidly from calculated confidence to visible distress. Recognizing the sheer severity of the High Court injunction that had just frozen her daughter's financial assets, Queen Camilla urgently summoned the senior palace legal counsel. This was a desperate attempt to mount a swift counteroffensive before the morning news cycle could fully piece together the reasons behind the police presence in Wiltshire. Behind closed doors, she reportedly demanded the immediate application of sovereign immunity to halt the legal proceedings and shield her family from further public and financial scrutiny. But the legal advisors delivered a blunt and sobering reality check. They flatly refused the request. Sovereign immunity is a highly specific constitutional protection, a legal privilege reserved exclusively for the reigning monarch, and by extension, the Queen Consort while executing her official duties. It absolutely does not extend outward to private citizens, regardless of their personal relation to the throne. Laura Lopes was facing the High Court not as a protected member of the royal family, but strictly as an ordinary civilian accused of holding disputed property belonging to the Crown estate. Furthermore, the traditional public relations machinery that Clarence House had relied on for decades was suddenly inaccessible. Even if the Queen Consort's team had tried to maneuver a public defense or leak a sympathetic narrative to friendly journalists, the avenues to do so were completely cut off. The Prince of Wales had already anticipated the palace's standard crisis response playbook. Operating with the undeniable authority of the newly signed letters patent, William's team had implemented a total communication firewall. The Buckingham Palace press office was effectively paralyzed, explicitly prohibited from issuing any official statements, denials, or background briefings without direct authorization from Kensington Palace. Camilla found herself entirely silenced by the very institution she had spent a lifetime successfully navigating. This morning marked a stunning reversal of fortune. For over 2 decades, she had expertly managed the press, steadily transforming her public image from a highly controversial outsider to a central, stabilizing force beside the king. Yet, all of that carefully constructed public relations architecture collapsed the moment it collided with the hard, uncompromising legal boundaries enforced by the heir to the throne. The physical contrast between the two royal households as the sun rose over London was impossible to ignore. Inside Clarence House, there was only isolation, frantic internal discussions, and a sudden inability to act. The traditional levers of royal influence had been systematically dismantled. Just a few miles away, however, Kensington Palace was fully illuminated, humming with the quiet, efficient energy of a command center. It was operating with absolute precision and unyielding focus. In the space of just a few days, the center of gravity within the British monarchy had fundamentally shifted. William had not just legally outmaneuvered the Queen Consort, he had made it unequivocally clear exactly where the real power of the modern monarchy now resides. It is easy to look at the swift legal maneuvers of the past 24 hours and see only a son driven by a desire for retaliation. But the Prince of Wales is not acting out of blind resentment. He is methodically restoring order to an institution that had allowed its own history to be blurred. He is using his executive authority to return the people's princess to the exact position of respect and prominence that was quietly eroded over the past 2 decades. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon on May 24th, the heavy doors of Kensington Palace opened to global television networks. When William stepped up to the podium, he did not look like a royal heir caught in the middle of an escalating family dispute. He appeared entirely composed, resolute, and in absolute command. His demeanor was sharp and authoritative, projecting the undeniable presence of a future king, stepping in to correct a systemic failure. Without any unnecessary preamble, William delivered an announcement that permanently altered the royal landscape. He officially confirmed the establishment of the Diana Heritage Trust. This is not merely a commemorative foundation. It is a legally binding financial and historical vault. By executing the documents to create this trust, William has permanently frozen any access the Queen Consort or her extended family might have to his mother's remaining estate. The legal parameters of this new entity are absolute. Moving forward, every piece of jewelry, every personal artifact, and every documented item that once belonged to the late princess will bypass the current sovereign's household entirely. They are now placed into a secure, untouchable lineage, designated exclusively to be worn and held by the current Princess of Wales, Kate, and eventually, Princess Charlotte. Then, looking directly into the camera lenses broadcasting to millions worldwide, William delivered a statement that will undoubtedly echo through the history of the Windsor family. His voice remained remarkably steady, yet his words carried immense, undeniable weight. He stated, "My mother remains the purest, most authentic spirit of this institution. What belonged to her will return to her children and remain firmly with her rightful heirs." The era of quiet misappropriation has officially ended today. With those few sentences, William achieved what 26 years of public debate and media speculation could not. For the global audience watching, it was a moment of profound and long-awaited resolution. He stepped forward as the definitive, unyielding protector of his mother's legacy, washing away decades of subtle compromises and institutional slights. He did not need to mention Queen Camilla's name to make his point devastatingly clear. By legally securing the physical items that tell Diana's story, he ensured that her presence within the royal family is no longer treated as an inconvenient memory to be managed, hidden, or casually handed away to outsiders. Instead, Diana has been elevated back to the absolute center of the royal narrative. Through the calculated actions of her eldest son, her historical footprint is now protected by an impenetrable legal firewall. Her legacy has been completely secured, and the undeniable magnitude of her memory now completely overshadows those who attempted to quietly take her place. Global news outlets from Reuters to the Associated Press have documented a definitive shift in royal influence. The Princess of Wales has just concluded a highly successful overseas engagement in Italy, while Meghan Markle faces mounting public backlash over her latest commercial venture. If you want to understand how authentic royal duty is dismantling millions of dollars in Hollywood public relations, hit the subscribe button now. The facts we are about to present will change how you view this ongoing media battle. Let us rewind to exactly 10:26 in the morning on May 13th. Catherine stepped out of her vehicle in Reggio Emilia, Italy. There was no Prince William by her side. There was no grand entourage demanding the attention of the press. She was there strictly for her early childhood development project, a cause she has championed with deep sincerity for years. The crowds that gathered on those Italian streets had been waiting for over 3 hours, and the noise that erupted when she arrived was simply deafening. But what happened inside the Loris Malaguzzi International Center is what truly shifted the global narrative. Sources present in the room described a moment that no public relations team could ever manufacture. Catherine got down on the floor, settling right at eye level with the children. She spoke to them in fluent Italian, a skill quietly honed during her time living in Florence before university. Later, when she stood in the kitchen of the Agriturismo al Vigneto making tortelli pasta, laughing naturally with the locals, it was entirely effortless. She was not asking for the spotlight. She simply owned it. A senior royal correspondent for the BBC noted this distinction perfectly. During a live broadcast, they stated, and I quote, "Royal diplomacy is not a performance you can turn on for the cameras. It is the result of 2 decades of relentless discipline, restraint, and genuine public duty." End quote. Catherine's silence on the endless drama surrounding her has become her ultimate weapon. She does not complain, she does not explain, she simply shows up and does the work. While Catherine was securing her place as the undisputed future queen on the global stage, a completely different scene was playing out across the Atlantic. Just a few hours later, at 2:14 in the afternoon, California time, Meghan Markle's camp attempted to counter the media wave. The result was a hastily dropped promotional video for her lifestyle brand. The contrast was impossible to ignore. On one side of the world, a princess was discussing early childhood education in a foreign language. On the other, a duchess in an evening gown was dramatically sipping tea and attempting to sell jam. Insiders close to the Sussex team reportedly described the mood in Montecito as incredibly tense. According to a former employee who recently spoke out, Meghan spent nearly 3 hours behind closed doors that afternoon, frantically trying to pivot their media strategy. We were told she could be heard expressing deep frustration over how the public was receiving her brand compared to the glowing, effortless coverage pouring out of Italy. This is the tragic flaw in attempting to run a royal title like a reality television brand. You can hire the most expensive image consultants in Los Angeles, but you cannot fake the genuine warmth and earned respect that Catherine has built over 20 long years. Meghan's strategy relied heavily on controlling the narrative, but she forgot that the public can always spot the difference between someone who is there to serve and someone who is there merely to be seen. But Catherine's flawless execution in Italy is only half of the story. While the Princess of Wales smiles for the global press, a very different, highly alarming reality is setting in behind the gates of a certain $14.7 million estate in California. The Hollywood smiles are starting to crack, and the bills are rapidly coming due. Do not go anywhere, because we are about to peel back the curtain on the actual cash flow of the Sussex Empire and the financial reality they are desperately trying to hide. Welcome to Montecito, California. It is an exclusive zip code where Hollywood dreams are carefully curated, aggressively marketed, and, more often than not, priced in millions of dollars of heavy mortgages. Behind the lush hedges and private security gates, the harsh reality of maintaining a royal standard of living in the American free market is quickly setting in. According to financial analysts and security experts recently cited by Bloomberg, the baseline operating costs for the Sussex family are nothing short of staggering. They currently reside in a $14.7 million estate. However, the mortgage is merely the starting line. Securing a high-profile family without the financial backing of a state apparatus is an incredibly expensive endeavor. Private security details alone are estimated to cost between $2 and $3 million every single year. When you factor in California property taxes, extensive staff salaries, legal retainers, and general estate upkeep, the annual burn rate easily exceeds $6 million. That is $6 million required annually just to keep the lights on and the gates securely closed. To fund this unprecedented lifestyle, they originally promised a global multimedia empire. Yet, Wall Street and entertainment industry insiders are now openly questioning the long-term viability of that promise. The pivotal shift in their financial trajectory was highly publicized when a $20 million podcasting deal with Spotify was abruptly terminated. Industry executives did not just end the contract, they publicly voiced their professional frustration, marking a stark and damaging shift in how corporate Hollywood views the couple's bankability. Furthermore, the Wall Street Journal published an in-depth analysis of their post-royal business model, pointing out a critical, structural flaw. The initial, massive corporate payouts were entirely based on the novelty of royal secrets and family tension. But once those memoirs were published and those interviews were broadcast, the content pipeline ran dry. The business model, heavily reliant on constant personal revelation rather than sustainable, original production, is proving fundamentally unstable. Corporate America operates on a very simple, unforgiving rule. You are only as valuable as the revenue you generate today. This brings us to the current landscape and the immense financial pressure now resting squarely on Meghan's shoulders. With major media production deals reportedly stalling, her new commercial lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, is no longer just a casual passion project. It has effectively become a necessary financial lifeline for the entire Montecito operation. The corporate stakes for this brand launch could not possibly be higher. There is a deep, unavoidable irony in this strategic pivot. They stepped back from the British monarchy, seeking ultimate personal independence and financial freedom. They wanted to escape the strict schedules, the unyielding protocols, and the public scrutiny of the institution. Yet, they now find themselves trapped in an entirely different kind of demanding cycle. The freedom they so desperately sought has morphed into an urgent necessity to move inventory. Instead of answering to the Crown and the British taxpayer, they are now entirely beholden to consumer metrics, profit margins, and the relentless pressure of online engagement, all just to sell jars of fruit jam and domestic lifestyle accessories. The financial realities of independent commercial life are proving to be far less forgiving than the structured protocols of the palace. When the cash reserves begin to dry up and the commercial ventures fail to hit their aggressive targets, people naturally look toward their roots for support. But when Harry turns his gaze back across the Atlantic toward London, he does not find an open door, a warm welcome, or a financial safety net. Instead, he is met with an impenetrable wall of ice. The physical gates of Buckingham Palace may always remain open to family, but the financial vaults of King Charles are now permanently locked. The transition from working members of the royal family to private Hollywood citizens came with a very steep, heavily documented price tag. To understand exactly why the palace doors shut so firmly on any financial support, one must look directly at the core, unbending principles of the British monarchy. As highlighted in extensive coverage by Reuters and backed by centuries of constitutional history, the institution operates on a strict, non-negotiable social contract. The sovereign grant, funded by the public, and the vast resources of the royal estates exist for one singular purpose: to support working royals who dedicate their entire lives to public service. There is absolutely no historical precedent and no acceptable mechanism for the monarchy to bankroll a private commercial enterprise operating in California. When the Sussexes chose to step away in pursuit of highly lucrative entertainment deals, they crossed an absolute line. The rule is incredibly simple. You cannot monetize the prestige of the crown for personal corporate gain while simultaneously expecting the institution to underwrite your multi-million-dollar private security and lifestyle costs. Standing firmly as the enforcers of this boundary are the Prince and Princess of Wales. William and Catherine have quietly evolved into the protective steel wall surrounding the crown. Notice their exact strategy amidst the endless media noise and public complaints generated from Montecito. There are no retaliatory press releases. There are no emotional television interviews with American network hosts. They simply act in accordance with the established rules of the institution. Catherine's flawless execution of her royal duties is a masterclass in this silent authority. Their absolute refusal to engage in a public war of words is not a sign of weakness. It is a highly disciplined, incredibly effective defensive strategy. By strictly adhering to protocol, they protect the dignity of the monarchy without ever needing to engage in the drama. They let their actions, and the rules of the crown, speak for themselves. At the very center of this institutional defense is King Charles, a man navigating a profoundly difficult personal duality. Behind the crown, he is a father who undoubtedly cares for his second son. But as the reigning monarch, his ultimate duty must always be to protect the thousand-year-old institution he now leads. The historic decision to officially sever the Sussexes' royal financial support in the first quarter of 2020 was a defining moment of his leadership. It was not a sudden act of parental anger, but a constitutional necessity. The sovereign simply cannot fund a commercially independent court operating out of the United States. This financial severance remains the most sobering consequence of Harry's departure. The royal safety net was permanently removed, forcing him to face the brutal, unforgiving reality of funding his own life in the private sector. Without the endless financial backing of the royal family, Harry is left relying on his single most respected and honorable asset, the Invictus Games. But even this globally celebrated cause, long viewed as his untouchable life vest, is now being dragged into a rising tide of controversy and intense financial scrutiny. You simply cannot use the unwavering respect for wounded veterans as a protective shield for expensive private jet travel and luxury accommodations. For years, the Invictus Games has stood as Prince Harry's most undeniable and respected achievement. It is a genuinely noble cause, providing a vital global sporting platform for wounded, injured, and sick service personnel. Recently, as confirmed by reports from the Associated Press, it was officially announced that the 2027 Games will return to the United Kingdom, specifically to the city of Birmingham. To secure this bid and ensure the event's scale, the British government has committed a massive £26 million of public taxpayer money. On the surface, it reads like a triumphant and highly emotional homecoming. The media narrative surrounding this return, however, is deeply and visibly split. On one side, established outlets like the BBC have highlighted the positive impact, praising the decision to bring the Games back to the country where the initiative first began. It is framed as a necessary opportunity to honor those who have sacrificed their physical and mental well-being for their nation. But there is a growing, highly vocal faction of critics, financial watchdogs, and even military analysts who are raising serious, uncomfortable questions about the operational reality of the organization. The focus of their criticism is never on the athletes. It is pointed directly at the increasingly glamorous optics surrounding the founders. During recent Invictus events, the international media coverage seemed to pivot sharply away from the gritty, inspiring stories of the veterans and directly onto the Duke and Duchess. Meghan's highly publicized designer wardrobe changes, VIP security demands, and heavily curated public appearances have sparked intense debate. Observers argue that an event originally designed to uplift wounded warriors is slowly morphing into a high-end promotional backdrop for a Hollywood lifestyle brand. When the headlines focus more on the cost of a celebrity's outfit than the resilience of a soldier who lost a limb, the core mission of the charity is fundamentally compromised. This shift in perception introduces a massive, unprecedented risk for the Sussexes. As long as the Invictus Games were funded entirely by private corporate donors and private foundations, their personal travel logistics and five-star accommodation choices were largely internal matters. But the injection of £26 million of British public funds changes the equation entirely. You cannot accept British taxpayer money without also accepting the intense public accountability that follows every single penny. Going forward, every chartered flight, every luxury hotel suite, and every operational invoice will be examined under a financial microscope by both the British press and government auditors. If the public perceives that their tax contributions are subsidizing a luxurious celebrity lifestyle rather than directly funding the rehabilitation and sporting facilities of veterans, the resulting backlash will be swift, severe, and impossible to manage. Harry is now precariously close to compromising his most valuable and respected charitable achievement. And Meghan? She is rapidly losing the single most important currency in the entertainment industry: positive attention. Do not look away, because we are about to expose the internal mechanics behind the biggest public relations disaster of the decade. In Hollywood, you can be controversial, you can be demanding, and you can even be cast as the villain. But there is one absolute, unspoken rule you can never break. You cannot be a commercial failure. Right now, Meghan Markle is perilously close to violating that final, unforgivable industry law. When the Duke and Duchess first relocated to California, their media strategy was clear, coordinated, and initially highly lucrative. They dominated the global conversation by positioning themselves as the ultimate survivors of an oppressive traditional institution. The high-profile sit-down television interviews, the multi-million-dollar six-part streaming documentary, and the unprecedented publication of the memoir generated massive initial engagement. But that specific public relations strategy possesses a very strict expiration date. The global public has an incredibly short attention span for ongoing grievances, especially when those complaints are continually broadcast from the manicured lawns of a $14 million estate. Audiences eventually stop offering sympathy and start asking what you actually have to offer beyond internal family drama. Once the palace secrets were fully monetized and exposed, the victim narrative entirely lost its commercial value. The undeniable shift in public sentiment became visible the moment mainstream American media fundamentally changed its tone. In the entertainment industry, when a public figure transitions from being celebrated on the covers of elite magazines to being the primary punchline on late-night comedy television, the landscape has permanently altered. We watch this transition happen in real time. Iconic satirical programs like South Park dedicated entire episodes to mocking their highly publicized demands for privacy, while mainstream comedy institutions like Saturday Night Live began taking open, direct jabs at their media campaign. This is a critical indicator of a failing brand. For years, the mainstream American media served as their safest harbor, providing a reliable, protective shield of favorable coverage. But in Hollywood, media loyalty is entirely dependent on public popularity. When you lose the protective backing of those major networks, you find yourself truly isolated in a fiercely competitive and unforgiving ecosystem. This media isolation highlights a glaring, almost uncomfortable blind spot: the massive, widening gap between how Meghan views her own public persona and how the global audience actually receives it. There appears to be a persistent belief within her management team that she remains a highly sought-after, inspirational global icon. However, current consumer engagement metrics and broad media reception paint a vastly different, much colder picture. The recent, highly publicized pivot to a domestic lifestyle brand focusing on selling artisanal jams and home goods reads to many industry analysts less like a natural creative evolution and much more like an act of commercial desperation. It is a frantic attempt to manufacture relevance and generate necessary cash flow now that the novelty of their royal departure has completely faded. But trying to force an image of effortless, aspirational domestic perfection onto a consumer base that has already grown exhausted by your public complaints is a nearly impossible marketing challenge. You cannot simply rebrand your way out of a deep deficit of public trust. The truth is always the most unforgiving reality check. Between a Princess of Wales who is quietly making global history through genuine public service, and a Duchess who is frantically trying to salvage a lifestyle brand in Southern California, the final outcome of this long standoff has already been decided. Celebrity stars burn bright and fade fast, but the institution of the monarchy endures. The final move has been made, and the outcome of this long, highly publicized standoff is now undeniable. Looking back at the events of the past few years, the reality of the situation is incredibly clear. The Princess of Wales never needed to launch a counterattack. She secured her position simply through unwavering endurance, deep loyalty to her role, and quiet humility. While others desperately chased the fleeting, addictive high of celebrity attention, Catherine remained firmly anchored to the concept of public duty. She understood a fundamental truth that Hollywood public relations teams completely missed. Authentic respect is not something you can demand during a primetime television interview, nor can it be purchased through a boutique marketing agency. It is something you earn through decades of consistent, uncomplaining service. Her undeniable triumph in Italy was not a carefully orchestrated media stunt designed to manage optics. It was the natural, inevitable harvest of 20 years, spent quietly doing the work, honoring the crown, and placing the needs of the public above her own personal narrative. As we look toward the future, the paths of these two couples are diverging further than ever before. Royal analysts and international diplomatic experts forecast a very clear and traditional trajectory for the monarchy. The Prince and Princess of Wales will continue to expand their global influence. They will embark on major international tours, representing the crown on the world stage and actively working to strengthen the global ties of the Commonwealth. Their calendar is dictated by diplomatic duty, completely secure in its funding, its purpose, and its historical weight. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex find themselves firmly grounded in California, facing a remarkably different reality. They are not planning global diplomatic missions. They are entirely consumed by a relentless, exhausting race for commercial survival. Every new brand launch, every podcast pitch, and every single public appearance is now heavily weighted with the intense pressure of maintaining their multi-million-dollar operating costs. They are running on a corporate treadmill that simply does not stop, desperately trying to remain relevant in an industry that quickly moves on to the next trend. The most striking realization in all of this is the sheer absence of malice from London. There was no grand, coordinated revenge plot directed from inside the walls of Buckingham Palace. The firm did not need to actively dismantle the Sussex brand or engage in a bitter media war. The institution simply held its ground, closed its checkbook, and allowed Meghan and Harry's own strategic decisions to run their natural course. Their current predicament is entirely self-inflicted. They walked away from the most famous and well-protected institution on Earth, promising a new, modern era of global independence. Yet, the Hollywood freedom they so aggressively pursued has ultimately transformed into an isolating financial prison of their own making. They traded a lifetime of guaranteed royal support and global respect for the endless, unforgiving anxiety of the commercial free market. Our investigation for today comes to a close, but the broader dynamics of this royal divide will continue to unfold. We want to hear from you down in the comments section. Exactly how long do you think the Sussex team can maintain their current financial pace in California? Let us know your thoughts. Do not forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you are the first to know when we open our next